Good morning, it is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Rich and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilfred, a very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
Iran threatens to set fire to any ship crossing the Strait of Hormuz shipping route, which could have a huge global impact on the cost of living.
President Donald Trump says the United States is ready to fight a war forever, boasting healthy munitions stockpiles.
Israel says it's continuing simultaneous strikes on both the Iranian and Lebanese capitals. Meanwhile, the US Embassy in Riyadh is hit by a drone strike.
Also this morning, the footage of Bill and Hillary Clinton's testimony to Congress over their links to Jeffrey Epstein is released.
We all are abiding by the same rules.
I will take that down.
Yeah, well,
I would like to take a break at this moment.
yeah,
I'd like to have
I'm
a
done
conversation.
for now.
A very good morning to you. The United States says it struck Iran again overnight, claiming to have destroyed several Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps targets. We don't know if these latest strikes were the hardest hits yet to come that were promised by the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio last night.
But look, this is a fast-moving situation, an awful lot happening on multiple fronts. So let's take you through some of the details. Firstly, Iran has threatened to set fire to any ships attempting to transit the Strait of Hormuz. It's a vital global shipping lane. That threat has spiked oil and gas prices. 2
Iranian drones struck the US Embassy in Riyadh, which was vacant at the time.
And also this morning, the president said that wars can be fought forever. So he claimed the US has a virtually, in his words, unlimited supply of munitions to fight. But there was a bit of a different message from the Israeli Prime Minister last night.
This is going to be a quick and decisive action, and we're going to create the conditions, first for the Iranian people to get control of their destiny, to form their own democratically elected government, which will make Iran a different Iran altogether. But we are creating, America and Israel together, are creating the conditions for them to do so. I think that if we go through what we plan to do, I think it will create conditions for peace. This is not an endless war. This is, in fact, something that will usher in an era of peace that we haven't even dreamed of.
Well, in a moment, we'll hear from Ali Bunkel, who's in Cyprus, and from Deborah Haynes, who's here with us in studio. But first, let's go to Diana, who's in Jerusalem for us. Diana, very good morning to you. I mean, if there was any hope that things could ease and die down 24 hours ago, I guess this morning the update is that it's escalated.
Well, certainly with that drone strike on the US Embassy in Riyadh, and also yesterday we saw the Qataris shoot down 2 Iranian fighter jets, Sukhoi Su-24 fighter jets. That's the home of the US military base, the Al Udeid military base, which is the US biggest military base in the region. Those are very significant things to be doing, to be sending fighter jets over to supposedly friendly Gulf states to try and hit US targets there. But interestingly, we here in Jerusalem and across of Israel have felt a slight pause over the last 24 hours. We just had a siren a few minutes ago, but nothing seemed to come of it. And that was the first in 24 hours, certainly here in Jerusalem. And the Israeli Defense Forces are giving their morning briefing at the moment, and they've commented on this slight lull in the pace of Israeli drones and missiles coming towards Israel. And they said it could be 2 things. It could be that they are exhausting their munitions and trying to do some munitions planning, but it could also be that we are degrading their capabilities with the huge amount of strikes that we are doing on their missiles and on their missile launchers, which they are emphasising. And in that briefing, he's been talking all about the fact that the focus does remain on Iran, the success that the Israelis feel that they've achieved hitting the intelligence headquarters of the Iranian regime, taking out 2 of their senior intelligence officials, one of whom was the person responsible for any kind of spy activity around Israel. And they said that 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 was their primary front, and that events in Lebanon towards Hezbollah are very much secondary in all of that. One other thing that I want to tell you about that, they've decided that they are not going to evacuate people from the north of Israel as they did when there were hostilities with Hezbollah before. I think that shows you how confident they are about their capacity to keep a very, very reduced Hezbollah in check this time round.
Diana, thank you very much indeed. Diana speaking to us there from Jerusalem. Well, let's bring in Ali Bunkle, shall we? Ali's in Cyprus for us. And Ali, that's obviously the site of the kind of UK military base. Just talk us through the retaliation that we've seen from Iran.
Yeah, well, I mean, this base, which is very close particularly to Lebanon and to Israel, was the subject of a number of drone attacks in 2 waves. Nothing's happened over the last 24 hours or so, but over a sort of 24-hour period, there are a number of drones that were fired towards this base. We assume that they came from Iran, possibly they came from Lebanon, but the thinking amongst the British government was that it happened before Sir Keir Starmer had given the OK for Americans to use British bases in their war against Iran. So it wasn't an immediate retaliation against that, but it did show the vulnerability of British assets around the region, and I'm sure you'll speak with Deborah about the British capacity to deal with threats to its military forces around the Middle East. I've got to say there's an awful lot of police on the drive up here, so they're clearly very much in a sort of an emergency posture at the moment. But as I say, nothing's been fired from towards here, I think, for about 24 hours now. But you know, it shows how Iran has sought to widen this war, which I think has surprised a lot of people, particularly in the Gulf states. But really, actually, when you look at what the Iranians had always threatened to do in the event of an attack, it shouldn't come as a massive surprise. You know, they had spoken about targeting, in particular, American bases or American diplomatic interests around the region. That's why there was an attack on the US Embassy in Riyadh overnight, a small fire there. We're not sure the extent of the damage. The US Embassy in Kuwait has said that it's going to stay closed for the rest of today. And so what Iran is trying to do is trying to, I think, strategically with and just pick up from what Diana said and what I'm hearing, whatever it does have left, because of course they were severely degraded last time in the 12-day war in June, is to try and use that cleverly to try and attack across the region. And I guess from an Iranian point of view, the hope would be to put pressure on America, in particular on Israel, but on America from its allies around the region to bring this thing to an end sooner rather than later.
Great stuff. Thanks so much for that. As we mentioned, Deborah's here with us in studio. Deborah, just stepping back from everything, first of all, what capability does Iran have that could hit UK assets? We're only talking about the airbase in Cyprus, obviously, not here, or am I wrong with that?
I mean, Donald Trump has made a big play about Iran's long-range ballistic missile capabilities, but the reality is it doesn't actually have operational intercontinental ballistic missiles that could hit, for example, the UK. It does have, however, a large arsenal, and we don't know exact estimates because obviously, as you were hearing from Ali, a lot of it has been degraded, of short and medium-range ballistic missiles, and they could hit what Cyprus is believed to be in range. And of course, we've also got assets across the Middle East. We've got a base in Qatar, we've got troops in Bahrain, we've got troops in Iraq, all across the Middle East. There are several thousand British military personnel, and then obviously hundreds of thousands of British citizens. And so, as well as the ballistic missile threat, there are obviously cruise missiles that Iran uses, and as well those Shahed drones, those one-way attack drones. Also cyber attacks, and Iran is known to be able to launch more sort of subversive attacks, sort of bombings, suicide ships or boats that could go up against a ship, that kind of less conventional warfare that it uses to go against larger militaries.
And do you think we have the capability to intercept one of those ballistic missiles if they did choose to fire them at our air factory, or would we have to rely on others' help for that?
Right now, we'd have to rely on the Americans. That's just the blunt fact. Yes, we do have Type 45 destroyers, which are big warships that are fitted with anti-ballistic missile systems. So they have the capability to shoot ballistic missiles out of the sky. And actually, we saw them do that against the Houthis off Yemen. Maybe it was 2 years ago now, in 2024. But that capability, I was told that quite a few munitions had to be used to hit that ballistic missile out of the sky. It is a difficult feat. And we only have 6 of these ships. And of those 6 ships, I was told by the Royal Navy yesterday that 3 are available, but sources have since said to me that actually they think it might be only 1 that could literally be deployed now. None of them, as far as I'm aware, are in the region at the moment. So in terms of the ballistic missile threat, we're relying solely on the Americans to defend Cyprus.
I mean, that's so interesting, isn't it? And also, I have to say, it's worth reflecting on the state of the relationship right now between us and the US. Donald Trump saying he was disappointed in Keir Starmer's response. You had Pete Hegseth, the kind of Secretary of War, saying, oh, traditional allies have been kind of clutching their pearls and wringing their hands. I mean, he's talking about the UK, right?
He is, definitely. However, it has to be said that there is such a close relationship on the military and the security side of things. And the UK is still highly regarded with its capabilities and its willingness to fight, unlike a lot of other allies maybe, who might be not so forward-leaning in terms of their willingness to attack and to defend themselves. And I do understand that there are American forces also on the base in Cyprus. They're not conducting strikes into Iran, but clearly you can imagine they're involved in defensive operations too. And there is a huge American aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean as well. So it is in America's interests to defend Akrotiri as much as it is to defend the British.
Deborah, we've got lots to get to with you throughout the morning. You're sticking around?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. So we'll have to hit pause for this hour, but Deborah will be back throughout the morning, as we mentioned, and we'll continue our coverage with a slew of great guests as well, we should say, on the latest in the Middle East. But up next, the impact, of course, is already being felt and potentially could be felt more depending on how things escalate and persist when it comes to oil and gas prices. Yeah,
so I think for a lot of people watching this morning, they're going to be thinking, what is the impact of this conflict on the economy? And there could be an impact, as Will was saying. So that's bad news. I'll take it over for a minute as he sorts his earpiece out.
I won't know what to do next if I haven't got my earpiece in.
Exactly, the voice is in your head. It's the spring forecast today, so it's a difficult backdrop, of course, with the international affairs as well.
I can confirm it is the spring forecast. That's what we're going to talk about next.
Yes, OK, good, thank you.
Yeah.
We've got Alex Rogers here, our political correspondent. In a way, the government's been really downplaying this. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, Rachel Reeves wants this to be a low-key affair. It's called a spring forecast, not the spring statement. She wants to create as little fanfare as possible. We're not expecting any real new policy announcements. It's just going to be an update on the UK economy and the health of the public finances. And I think that's it's quite telling that she's doing that, but it's also quite risky because usually the spring statement is an opportunity for the Chancellor to hammer home their economic narrative and strategy. And I suppose there could be a danger that if she doesn't do that, then opponents might seize the microphone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lack of policy changes in the short term maybe is always a risk because you might regret that chance to make a change. I think in the long term, the business community will welcome only one big fiscal event a year. And the kind of certainty it allows businesses to have to know, OK, this is the policy to work around and to plan. And I guess you'd have to say they've learnt a lesson from last year where, of course, the uncertainty was perhaps the defining feature as we approach the budget.
That's exactly why she's doing this, Wilf. She said, I only want one fiscal event a year. She wants to sort of end that speculation and intrigue that kind of does affect business confidence and market confidence, as you say. But politically, after the by-election, which was really bruising for Labour, coming third after the Greens and Reform, the thing that she might do to try and satisfy markets might not satisfy her Labour MPs who want her to do more on the cost of living. They want her to be more bold. So she's kind of trying to appease both, I guess, and maybe ends up appeasing neither.
Thanks, Alex. We are covering it, though, of course. I'll be here with Beth Rigby and at Conway, 12 till 2, to give you all the information, full coverage of that spring forecast. I think it's going to be really interesting, actually, because there has been a move that some economic indicators might be improving a bit, borrowing costs, for example, but will what's happened with Iran, potential rise in the cost of living, Is that going to impact things? It's going to be, really interesting to try and chew that over.
That's coming up, of course, later this morning. Now, the US House Oversight Committee's released its interviews with former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton as part of its investigation into Jeffrey Epstein.
Now, I think it's fair to say it got pretty tense between members of the House and Hillary Clinton after a picture of her testimony was leaked to the US press. Here's James Matthews reporting.
We had heard of what was said during the Clintons' testimony. Now we can see the video of it. Bill Clinton, he was asked about pictures of him in the Epstein files, specifically one of him in a jacuzzi alongside an unidentified woman.
No, I don't think I ever knew the photo was taken.
Okay, and for those who can't see it, it's a photo of you in a hot tub. There's a person next to you here. Do you remember where it was taken? Where was it taken?
I'm almost sure that this taken, I think there's an adjacent photograph, which you probably have, that if people saw it, they would feel that someone was trying to con them showing this picture. But anyway, this picture was taken in Brunei.
The former president was asked about Donald Trump and Trump's relationship to Jeffrey Epstein.
The president never, this is 20-something years ago, never said anything to me to make me think he was involved in anything improper with regard to Epstein either. He just didn't. He just said we were friends, and then we had a falling out over a land deal, property deal. That's all.
The former First Lady and Secretary of State had been furious while she was giving evidence when she found out a picture had been taken of her against House rules. There was a no-picture rule. It was taken by a Republican congresswoman, and it ended up on social media.
Can you please explain how that can
I'm done
occur?
with this. If you guys are doing that, I am done. You can hold me in contempt from now until the cows come home. This is just typical behavior.
We will go off the record.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So I would like to understand how that's permissible.
Before the hearing was...
It doesn't
Excuse
matter.
me.
We all are abiding by the same rules.
I will take that down.
Yeah,
So I would like to take a break at this moment.
Yeah,
and I'd like to have
I'm
a
done
conversation.
for now.
It was an acrimonious hearing, entirely in keeping with the Epstein investigation, which is about justice and accountability. It's also about politics.
Always about politics. James Matthews talking there. Well, look, we've been talking an awful lot on the programme about Iran, how it's going to impact the government's spring forecast going forward as well. A little earlier, I spoke to Darren James, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, a man who knows a thing or two about spring statements, but also, of course, really majored on Iran. Good morning. Good to have you on the programme today. Lots to talk about. I just want to start with comments that Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary of War, made overnight. He said capable partners are good partners, unlike so many of our traditional partners who wring their hands and clutch their pearls, humming and hawing about the use of force. Is he talking about us? Because it feels like he is.
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask him. But, you know, the Prime Minister was very clear yesterday that he will take decisions in the interests of Britain and learning the lessons of things like Iraq and other things. We have very clear frameworks in which we make decisions about using force and about military intervention. And as the Prime Minister said to the House of Commons yesterday, we'd only do so if it was in our interest as a legal basis and as a clear plan.
It's pretty clear, though, the Americans are frustrated. Would you agree with that? I mean, Donald Trump's said as much, right?
Well, I've seen the President's words, but that doesn't really negate the fact that we make decisions, as I say, on the basis of legality and British interest. And, you know, we were content to offer bases at Diego Garcia and RAF Fairford because evidently the operations the Americans will run from those airfields will reduce the risk to British citizens and British assets in the region, and that's why we agreed to the request to use those bases on that basis alone. But the Prime Minister was very clear that we were not involved in the first strike, and we're not kind of going to war with Iran or getting involved in a wider set of activities in the region.
I'm interested in what you say here because, it does echo Keir Starmer's words. He said yesterday the UK does not believe in regime change from the skies. I mean, Donald Trump said this is about regime change and it's happening from the skies. Does this mean that the UK government doesn't actually agree with the US and Israel action?
Well, look, the Prime Minister's words are very clear. I don't need to repeat them.
No, I'm genuinely not actually clear, though. Does this mean the UK government doesn't agree with the action, or do you agree with it?
Well, we were not involved in the initial action.
I know you weren't involved, but I'm asking if you agree with the action.
Well, evidently we weren't involved, which meant that we were not going to get involved in the first instance. But as I say,
so
the request
does that mean... I'm only asking again because I do think it's quite important. Does that mean that we didn't actually agree with the initial action? That's why we weren't involved. Is that what you're saying?
So we weren't involved, and as the Prime Minister said, we would never be involved if we didn't think that there was a legal basis to do so or it was in British interest to do so. But the Prime Minister's words are clear in that these disagreements, as difficult as they may be, you have to try to resolve them the best you can through diplomatic channels and the negotiating table, and that's the British government's position. So
was the action illegal then?
Well, of course, I mean, the Americans have got to set out the legal basis for their interventions.
But our assessment is that we didn't think there was a legal basis for it.
So it
would be illegal.
We were not involved in the first wave because it didn't meet the test the Prime Minister's set out. Whereas what we have agreed to this week is legal because what we're doing is defensive action to protect British citizens in the region, of whom there are over 300,000 of them across the area. So I think the public would rightly expect us to do what we can to defend them. And on the basis of legality and British interests, that's why we've consented to the use of our air bases. And actually, before that request as well, we did have British jets in the air doing defensive action, essentially shooting missiles down from the sky to support our regional allies. And so defensive action where there is a legal basis is justified, and that's what we are doing as a country.
What exactly has happened since we said that? Is anything taken off from bases? What has our involvement been?
So we obviously don't comment on operational issues in terms of air bases in the media, as you'll understand, but in the first few hours we did have RAF assets in the sky, as I say, shooting missiles down that had already been launched into regional ally spaces, protecting our military bases, as you might expect. The thing we've now agreed to, in addition to that, is that American air forces can use those bases, but only where they're taking off from those bases in order to defend British interests.
You talked about defending British interests. There is an argument that the best way of defending British interests is keeping America on side. And the reason that I say this is because if you look at what's happened with Iran, it's a very good example of modern warfare, right? It's about missiles, it's about drones, and it's about stopping them, in the air, right? Our Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes, yesterday described our air defences as woeful. I mean, has the government invested enough, not just this government, but successive governments, in this modern type of war? And as a result, are we reliant on America to provide that kind of protection?
Well, on the first part of your question, the American relationship is important to us and continues to be important. Obviously, we've taken a slightly different approach in terms of the operation in the region at this stage, but that doesn't negate the importance of the relationship.
Well, they described you as clutching your pearls, and Donald Trump said he's frustrated. I mean...
Well, as I say, it's up to the Americans to narrate as they wish, but the ongoing relationship is functional and important. But also our European partners are also really important to us in this space. You've seen the Prime Minister here coordinate with the President of France and the Chancellor of Germany, coordinating with the European Commission on how we do work with our partners, not just in Europe, but in the region itself. And that's the right thing to do.
We've obviously got the spring forecast later today. There has been notes of an improving economic picture. I think it's important to say, borrowing costs, all that kind of thing. Are you worried that this could all change because of Iran? And I'm thinking particularly about inflation, oil prices, petrol prices.
Well, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have said repeatedly that international events can obviously affect the UK economy. We've seen that before and we will see it again. But that's why our plan in terms of stability and strength within the UK economy is so important, whether that's about stable public finances or bringing down national debt so we have more room for manoeuvre, keeping the cost of government borrowing down, tackling the cost of living for people, and on energy, making sure that we're investing in homegrown renewable energy.
Are you worried specifically about Iran and the cost of living?
Look, there's probably going to be some impact. There's no question about that. We don't know yet what that is. But I think in the spring forecast later, what the Chancellor will be able to show is that our plan is working in terms of a stable approach to the UK economy, that in a world where there is lots of things happening is a very attractive economy for investors.
So an impact in terms of what petrol prices, is that the most likely one, you think?
So we have to see how long this goes on for. One of our hopes is that we can bring this to an end as quickly as possible. That's one of the reasons we've consented to our airbases being used, because the sooner it's over, the lesser the impact will be on our economy and the global economy.
The one other thing I wanted to ask you about was Ed Davey's comments about Dubai in the House of Commons yesterday. He said tax exiles should start paying taxes to fund the armed forces like the rest of us. The likes of Isabel Oakeshott and washed-up old footballers mock ordinary people who stay in the UK and pay our taxes here, but then expect us to pay the bill for their protection. Is he right?
Well, look, we expect British citizens, people who stay in this country, to pay their taxes here. That's why the government's changed lots of the old tax rules on the non-dom tax status, for example, that's been raising billions.
But he's talking about people who live in Dubai, though, not who live here, right?
Sure, but if they live in another country, that's a decision for them. But if they want to live in this country, then they should pay their taxes. There's no question about that.
But he's talking about British citizens living in Dubai, tax exiles.
Well, any of us could leave and live in another country. All I'm saying is that if you're coming to the UK and you're going to live and work in the UK, then you should pay your taxes here.
What did you think of Ed Davey's comments, then? Do you think it was appropriately timed?
Well, I think he's in tune with the public on this. I mean, if you live in the UK and expect the support of UK public services, you should pay your fair share of taxes towards them. I don't think there's any debate about that.
OK, and then just finally, I've got to squeeze it in, I'm very sorry. Poll today, the Greens have leapfrogged Labour. They're in second place after reform. I mean, are you worried? Are you the party of the left no longer?
No, I'm not. I'm not worried. I mean, you know, polls move around all the time. The Greens, and I interact with the Greens a lot at my home in Bristol. They're essentially the populist of the left, whereas Reform are the populist of the right. And they have a lot of diagnoses of the problems. They don't really have any answers to how to fix them that are credible. And I think when the public look at that, especially at the point of a general election, they'll be able to see that neither the populist left or the populist right have got any credible plans, and they're not going to want either of them to become Prime Minister.
I mean, you're right, the polls move around all the time, but polls have pretty consistently shown that people are deeply unhappy with this Labour government, right? Do you need to change?
If you step back in time and look at polls for any government, it always ebbs and flows, especially when you are the people having to make difficult decisions.
It doesn't feel like it is ebbing and flowing, though. This is my point.
Get Ed Conway on your screen with his slides, and you should have a look at the ebbs and flows.
Don't worry, I'm very well across, the ebbs and flows of polling. I don't need Ed Conway to explain it to me.
I meant more for your viewers, but whether you or Ed do it is entirely up to you. But if you look at the graph, it is quite normal. Because governments have to make difficult decisions, right? Opposition parties don't have to. You know, we had that for 14 years, but we'd rather be in government making those difficult decisions.
When was the last time Labour was leading the polls?
Well, when we won the general election, which is what matters. Because at the end of the day, it's what matters at a general election when the public have to decide who they want to be leading this country. They gave us a very significant majority to do that not long ago. We're getting on with that plan for change, and by the time we get to the next general election, I'm very confident the public will see that we've been delivering on those promises.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Darren Jones there. Stepping away, I think, from saying that the UK backed the initial action by the US and Israel.
Yeah, I think lots of interesting moving parts in that, and interesting defensive tone as well towards the end about the polls, which we'll have more to come later. We're going to have more as well on the latest in the Middle East. We'll be joined by a former UK ambassador to Iran next, Sir Simon Gass.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Welcome back. The IDF this morning says it's carrying out simultaneous strikes in Tehran and Beirut as the US launched further strikes on Iran overnight, saying it destroyed Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps command and control facilities. I'm joined now by the former British ambassador to Iran, Sir Simon Gass. Sir Simon, sorry for that sound effect there. Great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. Your assessment this morning, 4 days in, that this is likely to escalate and prolong for weeks and months, or find an off-ramp before then?
I don't think this is a campaign that will go on for months, no. I think that the political pressures on President Trump not to get embroiled in a long-term Middle Eastern war, which sends gas prices at the pumps in the United States going through the roof, that is not going to be a good strategy for the United States. So my expectation is that this will continue for several days to come. The United States will have a target list, so will Israel. They will want to get through that to a good degree. But I'd be surprised if this goes on for more than, let's say, 3 or 4 weeks.
In terms of the scale of response from Iran, maybe more the breadth of the response from Iran, have you been surprised by the number of different regional states they've decided to hit?
Not entirely. This is really what Iran said that it would do before the conflict. It said that those countries that allowed themselves to be used for US basing and for hostile actions against Iran would be regarded as targets. And this is Iran carrying out what it had previously said. We're probably in a position in which a lot of the decisions within the Iranian armed forces are being taken at quite a local level because of the disruption of their command and control. So in a sense, it is surprising because it is a change in what Iran has done in the past. But this is a unique attack from Iran's perspective. This is the first time that a US president has called for regime change as a result of US and Israeli military action. So this is an existential moment for the Iranian regime. And to that extent, it's not all that surprising that they are lashing out, no doubt in the hope, firstly, that the United States Gulf allies tell President Trump that he needs to call the campaign to a close sooner rather than later, and secondly, to put pressure on oil prices and the domestic economies of the Gulf states.
Do you think regime change is likely or possible?
I think it's possible. I don't think that it's likely. This is a pretty resilient regime, which is heavily networked inside a very large country. It's been in existence for 45 years, and I don't think that it will be at all easy to unseat. We're not seeing at the moment large popular demonstrations in Iran against the regime. We're not seeing defections from the Iranian armed services. We're not seeing splintering in the Iranian leadership. One can't exclude that possibility, of course. The future is inevitably uncertain. I think one of the most interesting things to watch will be the question of who becomes the next supreme leader in Iran. Is there any chance that they will be of a mind to be just a bit more conciliatory towards the United States and its partners? Even that, I think, is a long shot, but it's possible.
That said, to what extent is Iran going to be weakened by this, particularly in its military capabilities, such that in a year, do you think we'll conclude that not so much Britain, but Britain's allies in the region have benefited from this, or is that in fact unlikely?
Well, Iran has already been heavily weakened, of course, in the last couple of years. Many of its allies within the region, including the Syrian regime of former President Assad, have been pretty much demolished. The attacks by Israel and the United States last June also did quite a lot of damage to Iranian military infrastructure. So it is certain that after this, Iran will be further significantly weakened. It's worth recalling, though, that Iran tends to use asymmetric means of attacking its enemies. It uses ballistic missiles, it uses proxies, it uses sometimes terrorist-type tactics against its opponents. And therefore, even if you erode Iran's capability, that doesn't guarantee you security from retaliation.
Sir Simon, thanks so much for joining us. Sir Simon Gass there, the former UK ambo to Iran. Time now for a look at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
So actually we've got some quite good news for the weather for once, because it's going to be mild, quite sunny and mainly dry for much of the week. That's a surprise. But western parts do look a bit wet though on Thursday. Most places are going to be dry with plenty of sunshine this morning, although starting frosty in the north and west. Locally foggy in the southeast, southern England and the southern Welsh countries look a bit cloudy though, and there will be a bit of patchy drizzle there. The extreme north can expect the odd coastal shower, but it's going to turn out pretty mild, and it won't be as breezy as yesterday.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Now, we've been debating, of course, a lot the extent of a breakdown in relationship between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer. Well, Harry Cole of The Sun has just spoken to President Trump. He'll join us next.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. We've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. What you see a lot of here are military machines, soldiers, devastation and destruction. What you see very little of are the locals, the Gazans, the people who used to live here, the ghosts of this town. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered. You have the black flag, you have the yellow flag. People were kidnapped.
Inside this convoy, prisoners released by Israel in exchange for their hostages. The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. There were tears and there was defiance. This land has been farmed for hundreds of years, but now it's a scene of conflict. Israeli settlers have come to this area to seize land.
They've taken the land that I inherited from my father, and my father inherited from his father.
What would happen if you entered it?
Oh, we'll be shot.
This is a place where the past is cherished, but the future is feared. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Sky News, get the full story first.
Well, hello and thank you for watching. Tonight on The Wrap, we will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why. He did know what he was doing. Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live.
They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway.
Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Welcome back. In a further sign of the strained special relationship, US President Donald Trump has hit out at the Prime Minister over the failure to allow the US to use UK bases immediately when this action began. Let's bring in Harry Cole, the editor-at-large of The Sun, who's just spoken to President Trump. Harry, very good morning to you, very early morning where you are. Thanks for joining us. Congrats on getting President Trump. What did he tell you?
Well, look, he's not a happy bunny. I think we knew that already. But quite the depth of his disappointment in Keir Starmer, he did not hold back. When I mentioned his name, he kind of let fly. He said he just doesn't understand what's going on with Keir. He pointed to that Chagos Island deal, to the crucial base in Diego Garcia that's the centre of this bombing campaign against Iran, or potentially could have been, had Britain given permission for B-2 bombers to have taken off from the Indian Ocean in those strikes on Iran. And crucially, Keir Starmer didn't. And the president did not hold back. He said he couldn't believe he'd lived to see the day that the special relationship was in such a state. He said he loves the UK, he loves the British people, but he's just incredibly frustrated and confused by why Keir Starmer won't go along with it. I mean, for Keir Starmer back at home, perhaps with his political difficulties with the Labour Party, this could be quite useful in a small way, but it's safe to say that the special relationship is not in good nick tonight. And it reminded me a little bit of those days of Theresa May back in sort of 2017, 2018, when Donald Trump was just decided he was fed up with the British Prime Minister and would just let rip as and when he felt. And, you know, his assessment of Britain was not positive.
Harry, it's so interesting. And you're right, I think, to say that in some ways it could help him politically. And we've got a poll out today showing the Greens leapfrogging Labour into second place behind Reform. And we know their point of view when it comes to Iran and also Donald Trump. But did you get a sense that this is, I guess, a relationship that's repairable for Keir Starmer? Because, look, he's relying on Donald Trump for all kinds of things, from trade deals to military support.
Exactly, the president said, we bring a lot. We don't need to remind you guys, we bring a lot to the table. And what I thought was most remarkable was, given his past comments, he heaped praise on NATO, on Mark Rutte, on the Germans, on the French. And he said, we used to have the strongest of strongest alliances with Britain, but now we have better relationships with Europe. And you just think, you know, just 6 months ago, Keir Starmer was bigging himself up as a sort of Trump whisperer, that bridge between the EU and NATO and the new administration in the White House. It was always going to be an unlikely bromance. The Mr. Rules of Keir Starmer, a sort of left-leaning Labour leader, versus Mr. No Rules, Donald Trump, of the right. It was always going to be it was an odd coupling, so to speak, but it does feel to me like the odd coupling has really hit a bit of a wall. And what's more, I asked the president, what would you be doing in Keir Starmer's position? And he waded into all sorts of policy areas in Britain, from immigration to energy. And he made a very stark warning to Britain when he said, look, you've just got to stop letting people into your country who hate you. You've got to stop letting in mass migration of foreigners, quotes. And I asked him about those allegations that Kemi Badenoch has made, that Nigel Farage has made, that perhaps Keir Starmer is, in fact, looking through a political lens rather than a geopolitical lens when it comes to his support for the action in Iran, given, as you say, the Greens are breathing down his neck, and he agreed that was a possibility. So look, the special relationship is deeper than two politicians. It's older and stronger, and it's in the skies and under the seas and in the security world, cables, cyber, spies, you name it, it's there. It's lasted longer than politicians, but it's never nice when the two protagonists are going head to head.
Harry, great stuff. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And congrats on the interview. And we'll see where that relationship emerges in the next couple of days.
Now, I think everyone would remember 5 years ago when the news first came out that Sarah Everard was missing. And then that was the kind of weeks and days that followed, the, I guess, fear of what had happened to her, only to find out that those worst fears were realised. She was abducted, raped and murdered by a serving Metropolitan Police officer.
Sky News can reveal dozens of serving police officers across the country have been investigated for rape since the murder of Sarah Everard.
Yeah, it's pretty astonishing, to be honest, the report. Of all 17 of the police forces we spoke to, 17 of them said that they'd investigated police officers for sexual offences. The Deputy Assistant Commissioner at the Met Police told Sky News it's an awful truth that there are still abusers inside the organisation. Here's Molly Malone.
I've been followed home before. It's something that is a reality.
People are scared to talk about these things. It's not right that we're not safe in the evenings.
The change is down to men.
I've already checked behind me twice.
I like to stay quite alert and aware.
5 years ago, Sarah Everard was picking up a bottle of wine on the way to a friend's house. Later that evening, she was abducted, raped and murdered by a serving Metropolitan Police officer.
She should still be alive today, and if policing was better, then she might be still alive today.
It was a horrific case that lit a touch paper in our society and ignited a conversation about women's safety and trust in the police.
We found widespread evidence of criminal investigations into hundreds of officers for sexual offences.
It's an incredibly awful truth that we have abusers and perpetrators inside our organisation.
It was also talked about as a turning point, a moment demanding change. 5 years on, I want to try and get a sense of whether that change is happening. How are women feeling in terms of safety in public spaces? And how is the police service doing to improve and build back trust?
Molly joins us now. So, Molly, you asked police forces if they had been investigating serving officers for sexual offences since Sarah Everard, and every single one of them who came back said yes.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a distinction in that these are criminal investigations. So lots of forces sort of have sexual misconduct investigations, that's internal, but these are criminal. So, you know, any citizen would face the same sort of criminal investigation. And look, it is only a snapshot of forces. There's 43 forces, this is 17 of them. But yeah, quite striking that every single one that responded said that they'd, since Sarah Everard, investigated for sexual offences, and 16 of 17 for the more serious offence of rape. And then a third of those forces brought charges. And look, we talk about horrific cases and horrific things that have happened, but we think it's important to sort of evaluate progress to see what's happening. And there were some pretty damning findings. And I wanted to put that to Helen Millichap, who is the Deputy Assistant Commissioner at the Met. I should say we didn't have a response from the Met. This is 17 forces across England and Wales didn't have a response from the Met. But I think she was quite surprised by what we found as well. You can hear a clip of what she said.
It's an incredibly awful truth that we have abusers and perpetrators inside our organisation, and could be one of the biggest factors in preventing women and girls coming forward to report crimes to us for fear that they cannot trust the response they get because of our internal culture and those that are inside our organisation who don't uphold our standards. So there's a lot of data that does show you that more misconduct reports are being dealt with than ever before. There is some rising confidence in public complaints into policing as well, and you can see the evidence in front of you of just how many are being sacked from policing at the moment compared with previous years.
Molly, I mean, this is going to shock and dismay everyone. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Is there any element of this and these shocking statistics that is as a result of what happened 5 years ago, that they are now looking into it, even if it's so revealing about the scale of the problem overall?
Yeah, it's a really important point, and that's something that I had a long interview with the Met Commissioner as well, Sir Mark Rowley, who obviously profoundly apologised to Sarah Everard's family, not for the first time, but there is some progress. And in the Met, for example, they didn't respond to our Freedom of Information request, but we analysed their data. And Sir Mark Rowley pointing out that in the last 3 years, they've sacked 1,500 people, which in his words is unprecedented. So they are definitely conducting...
1,500?
1,500. And I think, to be honest, that illustrates two things. One, there is a lot of people...
All because of sexual-related issues?
Sexual misconduct. Lots of them, yeah.
Blimey.
And so it illustrates two things, doesn't it? One, that there's lots of people to investigate, but they are taking it much more seriously. I do also want to point out that we had a separate FOI on indecent exposure, and you'll know the significance of that. Wayne Couzens indecently exposed himself just days before he murdered Sarah Everard, and at the time it was looked into, and it wasn't properly looked into, it wasn't properly investigated. And actually our FOIs, I think 25 forces responded to that one, and they are taking it more seriously in the sense that they're identifying the suspects more frequently. Investigations are being kept open for a longer period of time. So there are sort of green shoots, I guess, in terms of positivity, but quite shocking findings that in so many forces, you know, police officers are being criminally investigated for the crimes that the public put trust in them to police.
It's so important, Molly. Thanks so much for reporting on this issue, Molly Malone. Speaking to us now. Nadeem Vera Baird was the Victims Commissioner at the time of Sarah's murder, and she joins us now. Vera, it's great to speak to you again. I know we've spoken before and how seriously you take these issues. I just want your reflections on Molly's reporting there. Basically, every police force that came back saying that, oh, yeah, we have investigated criminal investigations, our own officers for sexual offences.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't surprising. It's a good thing that it's happening, isn't it? But, you know, the question is, has there been a major improvement? And I mean, the answer is very clear from Molly's findings. And also, I'm afraid, from the Angelini review, which was the actual inquiry set up to see where the change came from, what happened to Sarah Everard and what followed, which is a very disappointing series of outcomes. So, I mean, on policies, they've got lots of great policies now, papers, that's right. Safety of women, confidence of women, I doubt that that's moved forward much at all.
I have to say, it is pretty depressing to hear you say that you don't think it's moved forward much at all. I mean, the government, I guess, would say that tackling violence against women and girls is a national emergency that they're taking seriously. Do you think they're taking it seriously enough?
It's certainly, I'm reasonably impressed by the violence against women and girls strategy that is intended to halve violence against women and girls within 10 years. It is not only, you know, quite far-reaching, but also the ministers in the usual suspect kind of areas of justice and the Home Office have gone to other departments and made sure that they're enrolled. Quite obviously, though, there are huge cultural issues in the police still, are there not? I have briefly met Mark Rowley at some social event, and I asked him how he expected people recruited in the way that they recruit to have real sympathy and interest in stopping violence against women and girls. I think the strapline in their recruiting then was have a career that other people only see on the screen. And it is all about young men driving fast cars in uniform to chase bad young men running away, climbing over roofs, drones and helicopters and so on. This is not how you recruit people who have an interest in this area that we are very worried about. I didn't get a satisfactory response from that. We find now that they haven't really, in the police at all, eschewed recruiting people who may even have a caution for a sexual offence. 1,500 having gone from the Met in a short time is excellent, but why on earth were they there in the first place? And recruiting people on the basis, you know, of sort of male superior ability to run fast and climb is not a way. Are they not trying to recruit men from the White Ribbon Campaign who've committed themselves to preventing and assisting the end of violence against women and girls? Do they ever try to recruit people from the violence against women and girls sector who for many, many years have been the experts in this territory? Until they take steps of that kind, you know, policies and plans, and certainly there were plenty of those designed after the death of Sarah Everard, are not going to hit the culture, which is a massive problem. I suspect, you know, that the senior officers believe wholly in these, recruits are told wholly about the new policies and plans, but in the middle ranks, it just gets dispersed. And there is, I think, in the police, still an immense belief in the police being okay people. And there seems to be a huge toleration by police of sexist behaviour by other police, not only against the public, but against women in the force themselves, which is just so wide that there's obviously some sort of counterbalancing force that says, you know, you're one of us. We'll tolerate you being a bit chippy with women because you're a great runner and a great driver, or whatever it takes. That really deep, hugely masculine culture is not going to support hugely the women who need to trust the police and need to know that they can go and they will get a sympathetic person who comes out and tackles the problem of abuse, of harassment, of flashing in public places, none of the figures of which have significantly gone down since the Sarah Everard episode. There is a long way to go, even now.
Dame Vera, thank you so much for joining us. We're sadly right up against the clock at the end of the hour, but thank you very much for joining us. Molly's still here, just under a minute left. Molly, I mean, not surprising Dame Vera picked up on that 1,500 figure. I was just Googling it. So there's 33,000 police officers in the Met Police. It's a staggering absolute number, but it's a staggering relative number. I mean, it really is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a lot of people. I think that they try and say that, look, as Dame Vera was pointing to, that means that they are taking it more seriously. That means that they are investigating more people. What we also found at the Met, lots of people, I think 28%, you know, they'd investigated 1,000 since Sarah Everard's murder for sexual misconduct. 28% were allowed to continue working as normal throughout that investigation, which I think is quite staggering as well.
Molly, thank you. It feels so important 5 years on to, you know, not only remember Sarah Everard, but also just to try and drive through that change. The change that we were promised that something would finally happen. And I have to say, the figures, I guess there is a bit of a light in the fact that we know this stuff, but still an awful long way to go. Thanks for being with us. We'll have more on Iran in just a few moments.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Sophie and Wilf, good morning from me as well. An awful lot of fast-moving content for you on Iran.
Iran threatens to set fire to any ships crossing the Strait of Hormuz, which could have huge impact on global oil and gas prices.
Donald Trump says the United States is ready to fight a war forever because of its healthy munition stockpiles.
Israel says it's continuing simultaneous strikes on both the Iranian and Lebanese capitals. Meanwhile, the US embassy in Riyadh is hit by a drone strike.
Also this morning, footage of Bill and Hillary Clinton's testimony to Congress over their links to Jeffrey Epstein is released.
We all are abiding by the same rules.
I will take that down.
Yeah, well...
I would like to take a break at this moment.
Yeah,
I'd like to have
I'm done for now.
Morning. Thanks for joining us today. The United States says it struck Iran again overnight. It says it destroyed several Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps targets. And look, we don't know if these latest strikes were the hardest hits yet to come that were promised by the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio last night.
But let's take you through the key overnight developments. Well, Iran has threatened to set fire to any ships attempting to transit through the Strait of Hormuz. It's a vital global shipping lane. And the threat has spiked oil and gas prices once again. They're up 4% this morning, oil prices. Iran continues to strike outside the borders, including hitting the US embassy in Saudi Arabia and a fuel import in Oman.
So also this morning, the president came out to say that wars can be fought, in his words, forever, claiming the US has a virtually unlimited supply of munitions to fight. There was also a bit of a different message from the Israeli Prime Minister last night.
This is going to be a quick and decisive action, and we're going to create the conditions, first for the Iranian people to get control of their destiny, to form their own democratically elected government, which will make Iran a different Iran altogether. But we are creating, America and Israel together are creating the conditions for them to do so. I think that if we go through what we plan to do, I think it will create conditions for peace. This is not an endless war. This is, in fact, something that will usher in an era of peace that we haven't even dreamed of.
Well, earlier we spoke to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, about how the government is positioned on the joint action taken by the US and Israel.
Was the action illegal then?
Well, of course, I mean, the Americans have got to set out the legal basis for their interventions.
But our assessment is that we didn't think there was a legal basis for it.
So
it would be illegal.
We were not involved in the first wave because it didn't meet the test the Prime Minister's set out. Whereas what we have agreed to this week is legal because what we're doing is defensive action to protect British citizens in the region, of whom there are over 300,000 of them across the area. So I think the public would rightly expect us to do what we can to defend them. And on the basis of legality and British interests, that's why we've consented to the use of our air bases.
Well, in a moment, we're going to hear from our Europe correspondent, Asda Bunkle, in Cyprus, and also from our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, who's with us here. But first, let's speak to our international correspondent, Diana Magne, who's in Jerusalem. Diana, what do you make of the developments that we've seen overnight? What's your takeaway?
Well, it's extraordinary to see the US Embassy in Riyadh hit by a drone. Donald Trump has promised retribution. We have yet to see what that looks like. He did make those comments about endless war. My sense is that that was more to deter anybody who might decide to do something elsewhere in the world from doing that, given the fact that US assets are so tied up in this region at the moment. Donald Trump making it quite clear that he has more than enough to go round should it be required of him. He did say yesterday also that this Iran war he felt would take 5 or 6 weeks, and interestingly did not rule out boots on the ground. We shall have to see whether that manifests. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, really the only one who was most specific about what the objectives were, saying that this wasn't about regime change, but that it was about degrading their ballistic missile capabilities, making sure that they don't have a nuclear program. And of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, following following up, as Donald Trump has said, that it is about creating the conditions at which point the Iranian people can take matters into their own hands. But at what exactly that stage is has yet to be defined, what those conditions would be. We've just been hearing from the IDF, their morning briefing. It's interesting because over the last 24 hours, really, there has been a sort of lull in terms of Iranian missile attacks into Israel. And they said, we're not quite sure what that is. It could be two things. It could be mission planning on the part of the Iranians, and it could just be that they are sending out missiles across so many fronts at this stage and their munitions are being degraded. But I certainly don't think that the lack of sirens that we've had for the last 24 hours is necessarily going to continue that way. And also they made comments which I think are worth bringing to your attention about Lebanon, that they have positioned now Israeli troops in southern Lebanon in the border regions. They characterise that as defensive. They say that they're not evacuating Israelis from the north of Israel, as they did, for example, after October the 7th, as they strike targets in Beirut and in southern Lebanon. And I think that gives you a sense of how confident they feel in their capacity to deal decisive blows against Hezbollah, given how degraded Hezbollah is as a result of the last 2 years.
Diana, great stuff, thank you. Let's bring in Ali, who's in Cyprus near RAF Akrotiri. Ali, any further Iranian retaliation towards that particular base, and what about the rest of the region?
No further retaliation here, at least for coming on 24 hours now. There was a couple of waves of drones that did come towards our Akrotiri. We think one of them landed near the US element that's here. It says, for those who don't know, it's an RAF base, a major RAF base in the region, but there has been, not just because of this war, but there has been really historically a pretty significant US presence here, often special forces using it as a post to project into the Middle East, but also US aircraft as well, sophisticated aircraft. So it is a target. I think it was going to be a target even before Sir Keir Starmer decided that British bases could be used by the Americans. And I don't really think people should be that surprised. The Iranians had always made it pretty clear in the event of a war that the gloves would be off and that they would attack, at the very least, US military interests and US diplomatic interests around the region, but they would widen it out to anyone who they thought was an enemy. And I mean, I guess the point of that, the thinking behind that, is for Iran not just to target their enemy, the Americans, but also to try and drive a wedge between the United States and its allies. Allies like Britain, like Qatar, like Bahrain, like Kuwait, like Saudi Arabia, etc., who all host these US military bases in their countries in order that they might turn on the Americans and try and put pressure on to stop the war. The risk for the Iranians, of course, and if they keep attacking the Gulf states, the risk will be that the Gulf states themselves might feel that they have no other choice but to get involved. And so it is a very, very dangerous moment. I think the lull that we've seen, and Diana was talking about, the lull in some respects in Iranian missile fire is confusing. It could be that they have depleted stocks after the 12-day war in June. It could be that they have another strategy up their sleeves.
Ali, thank you very much indeed. Ali Bunkle there for us in Cyprus. Well, let's get a bit more now, shall we, with Deborah Haynes. If you're honest, how reliant are we on the Americans for our defence?
We are absolutely reliant at the moment on so much of our military capability. So we've been focusing last hour, weren't we, on the ballistic missile defences, and at the moment we don't have any in the region to be able to defend against ballistic missile attacks against British interests, and we are wholly reliant on the Americans to be able to protect our forces against that. But then more broadly, when it comes to our actual wider armed forces, there is a huge amount of enablement, it's called, that the Americans provide, be that intelligence feeds, satellite communications, and electronic warfare in particular, that enable our forces to be able to operate to their maximum potential. And so without the Americans, our force, which is already, as we've described, hollowed out, becomes even more so. So it is a fundamental relationship.
And how is the military community looking at what the original request was by the US to use potentially our bases, whether it was in Diego Garcia or in the UK? Are they seeing that as a request that was very demanding and would tie us directly with offensive action, or all things considered with where we are, less of a request than perhaps it's been made out to be?
I mean, it is about signalling. And of course, as Donald Trump made clear in that social media post that he did when he was sort of slating Keir Starmer over the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia in particular, he singled out Diego Garcia, which is a joint British-American airbase, and RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire in the UK as being sites that the Americans had in their war plans for Iran, part of their sort of places that they wanted to launch strikes from. You've got a big bomber force, for example, that can strike Iran from Fairford. And so in terms of the calculations, clearly it wasn't nothing. Obviously, as we've seen, it wasn't fundamental because they could still launch the operation. But more than that, it's about showing you're a good ally, which is important too. Think of the Iraq War back in 2003. One of the fundamental arguments that I've always been told about the British calculation about being so close to George Bush in the invasion of Iraq was that because for the UK, an ultimate strategic policy was unity, alliedness with America because of that special relationship and cementing that special relationship. And it seems now, with Donald Trump in the White House, the UK is maybe less aligned to the American special relationship, more aligned to the Europeans, but that really exposes that capability gap when it comes to the military, which we are clearly trying to fill. But when it comes to the UK, we're not filling it anywhere near as fast as military insiders say we absolutely crucially need to.
Debs, great stuff. Thanks so much. Really interesting and important analysis. And Debs will be back again next hour. Meanwhile, the other story, of course, relating to all of this is the Brits abroad who want to get home. And the first group of relieved British Middle Eastern-based Brits got home on a flight last night. And it's thought some 300,000 or so are still stranded there. Barnaby's here with us. Barnaby, we thought the airspace in some of these places was completely shut down, but early flights have been able to get back already.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, the airspace across the Middle East is in the main still shut down. As we've been reporting for the last 72 hours, this conflict has massively widened with the Iranians striking targets across the Gulf. Now, the government estimate there are still about 300,000 British people in the Middle East, but we are starting to see a trickle of flights from Dubai and from Abu Dhabi. The government there saying that people should only go to the airport if their airline gets in contact with them. And we spoke to some people arriving in Heathrow yesterday evening, and they're pretty relieved to be home.
As we were waiting for the plane, we had an alert on our phone saying to get away from the windows for potential missile attack. So
everyone kind of like hunkered into the middle, and it was all very scary. Really stressful, really tense. Witnessing sort of missiles exploding above. We witnessed the port, a warehouse at the port go up in flames because of falling drones.
I couldn't take a deep breath until I reached here. We were very scared. We didn't know what would happen the next second. We had lost hope. We thought 1 or 2 weeks we were going to be there. And but yeah, the flight email was a surprise on a Monday morning.
And this has been such a big part of the story, hasn't it? Just because the number of Brits in the region, and I guess, look, we've seen some people in Heathrow there, but there's an awful lot of people still there.
That's absolutely right. And I think we also have to think about people further afield. If you're in Bali, Australia, New Zealand, your flight is possibly going to stop in the Middle East on the way back to the UK. And this all has massive implications for the Gulf as well. These are countries that have sold themselves as being great places to invest in, to do business in, insulated from the instability that affects other parts of the Middle East. But at the moment, that security seems to have been shattered.
Barnaby, thanks so much for that. Now, we just wanted to bring you the latest on the oil price, because it has picked up again a little bit this morning. It's now up 4.3% today. It follows an 8 or 9% move yesterday. So we're looking at a Brent oil chart. That's the international gauge of oil prices, now above $80. $81.10 for the price of oil. And we're seeing gas prices up another 5 or so today. So, Sophie, it is certainly starting to have an effect. We're at the highest gas price, the domestic gas price, since February 2023 now. Again, the question now is how long the scale of activity we've seen in the Gulf persists. And I think you'll start to see it go exponentially higher if it persists for months. If it's only for days or weeks and we fall back down to earth again, then it won't feed through so much to domestic prices.
Yeah, domestic prices as in how much you pay at the petrol pump, how much you pay at the supermarket, your gas bill, all that kind of stuff as well. And that, of course, is the backdrop for Rachel Reeves' spring forecast. The Chancellor's spring forecast, Alex Rogers, is in Downing Street for us this morning. I mean, she kind of was hoping it would be a bit of a non-event, right? But it might be a bit more of an event if these oil prices and gas prices keep going one way.
That's right, Sophie. She's very much trying to make this low-key affair. She's trying to sort of instill market confidence by not creating a lot of fanfare around it. She's called it the spring forecast rather than a statement to try and downplay it. But I think domestically she's under pressure along with Sir Keir Starmer following that by-election. And on the world stage as well, obviously with the escalating conflict in Iran, that could have a real knock-on effect on oil prices and inflation back here, which is going to make that make it much more difficult for the government to sort of drive down the cost of living, which it's big mission, really.
Alex, great stuff. Thanks so much. Alex Rogers there for us in Downing Street, of course, outside number 11 today, more than number 10. The spring statement kicking off at 12:30, and Sophie and the team will have full coverage of that. Let's preview it now with Sir Jeremy Hunt, of course, the former Chancellor and also former Foreign Secretary. Particularly great guest to have today. Sir Jeremy, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Is it right that the spring statement's not going to have any policy changes in it?
Well, I think that's the government's plan, but I think they are going to have to react to the events in Iran. And I was just listening to your conversation with Sophie just now. When I was Chancellor, we used to have a rule of thumb that if international oil and gas prices go up by 20%, that's 1% higher inflation and 0.5% lower growth. And you cannot ignore that kind of impact on the economy. So I think Rachel Reeves will be thinking about whether in the year ahead we're likely to have higher inflation, higher interest rates, more pain in terms of people's pay packets, how much they have to pay for goods on the high street. And I think that will create pressure in perhaps areas we're not talking about yet, such as why have we stopped exploring new oil and gas in the North Sea when we have it right there? Why do we have these big green levies when people are worried about the cost of living? Those kind of debates, I think, are going to become a lot more salient.
So come to that longer-term stuff in a second, and also specifically Iran in a second. But stepping back, as we approach this fiscal statement, and I guess where borrowing costs are today versus in November, and the lack of crazy coverage leading up to it, is that itself something to be pleased about?
It's definitely a calmer backdrop than we've had ahead of Rachel Reeves' previous fiscal events. That is true. But I think the challenge for her is that her key message, what she wanted to take out of that, was a message about stability. But when you look at the world today, what people are actually going to be saying is, what is your plan for this very unpredictable world that we're now in? And I think the UK is, as I found when I was Chancellor, we're more exposed than other countries to what's happening across the world because our domestic electricity prices are set by international gas prices. So there's a direct link between those prices you were talking about just then. Crude prices up nearly 10%, gas prices up nearly 50% as a result of the attack on the LNG terminal in Qatar. So that, I think, is going to be something where Rachel Reeves is going to need to explain how she is going to make the UK more resilient.
In terms of whether or not those costs to people back home and inflation, and of course, more importantly, the immediate regional threats to life and security in the Middle East are real or not, is it worth the action that the US has taken to remove Ayatollah Khamenei and his direct lieutenants or not?
Well, I was just looking up this morning something that Churchill once said about war. He said, once the signal is given, no man can control its course. And that applies to Donald Trump just as it applies to everyone else. And I think what we're seeing here, for example, already, perhaps the most unexpected thing has been Iran choosing to aim its fire at other countries in the Middle East. Now, that is something that could have been calculated to have the maximum possible effect on global oil and gas prices. And that is probably not something that Donald Trump was foreseeing. He was expecting attacks on American bases and American interests. So I think we are in a very unpredictable situation. I think there's one other thing that, from the UK's point of view, and I personally think we should have been all in with the United States. I think we made a strategic miscalculation. But whether or not we're in or not, what we have to do is to start being better at defending ourselves. Because until the UK, and indeed Europe, is able to stand on our own 2 feet, then we are going to get pushed around by these global events.
Do you think their intervention was legal?
Well, I think the curious thing about Keir Starmer's position is that you have left-leaning governments in Australia and Canada that clearly think it was, and they found they were able to come out in full support of Trump's action. And I'm afraid it looks like we were dancing on the head of a pin, saying that we couldn't find a legal basis 1 minute and then the next minute we could. I think with this president, you're either all in or you're out in the cold. And our strategic interest is really related to what Sophie was saying, to what Debs was saying earlier, that we still need America to help us defend Europe. American taxpayers pay for around 1/3 of the cost of defending Europe. And we've got to be very careful not to undermine that until we built up our own defences.
With respect, though, to Canada and Australia, this was an easy thing for them to align with President Trump on. They just had to issue a statement. They don't have bases that were potentially going to be used. I come back to my first question on this, whether or not, all things considered, given where we are, as you outlined, maybe we should have decided to side with Donald Trump or not on this. Do you think it was legal?
Well, I think it was. And I think the legal advice is a lot less clear than Keir Starmer was making out. Obviously, if you ask someone like Lord Hermer, who has a certain set of views about the world, you are going to get a certain answer. But lots of other very distinguished lawyers are saying it is perfectly legal. We have had attacks on UK interests in the last year repeatedly by Iran. So I personally think that the case for self-defence is very justifiable. But I also think that when you're making these very balanced decisions, you have to look at the bigger picture. Right now, we are dependent on the United States for the defence of Ukraine. If Donald Trump pulls the plug on Ukraine, we could see Ukraine capitulating to Russia. That would be incredibly dangerous. That would be directly against the UK's national interests. And that's why I think the Prime Minister did make the wrong call.
Just bring it back to the cost of living for us to wrap things up, Sir Jeremy. I mean, if this persists for more than a week, do you think we're underpricing at the moment the chance of quite a big uptick in inflation in people's bills at home?
Well, we don't know how long this is going to last. But what I would say is that the fact that this seems to be spreading throughout the Middle East, the fact that Iran has closed the Straits of Hormuz, where 1/5 of the world's crude oil goes through, means that we have to recognise this may last longer than we would hope. And when I was Chancellor, I would just say this, I had to put aside just under £100 billion to help people with their energy bills. If you remember, people were terrified energy bills were going to go above £2,000. And we put in place plans to help families with that. So if that happens, then there's going to be severe pressure on Rachel Reeves.
Sir Jeremy, thanks for joining us. Great to see you as always. The former Chancellor, former Foreign Secretary. We're going to take, no, not yet a break, apologies. We're going to get a recap of the key takeaways from the testimony of Bill and Hillary Clinton that was released by the US House Oversight Committee overnight. James Matthews has that for us.
We had heard of what was said during the Clintons' testimony. Now we can see the video of it. Bill Clinton, he was asked about pictures of him in the Epstein files, specifically one of him in a jacuzzi alongside an unidentified woman.
No, I don't think I ever knew the photo was taken.
Okay, and for those who can't see it, it's a photo of you in a hot tub. There's a person next to you here. Do you remember where it was taken? Where was it taken?
I'm almost sure that this pic, and I think there's an adjacent photograph, which you probably have, that if people saw it, they would feel that someone was trying to con them showing this picture. But anyway, this picture was taken in Brunei.
The former president was asked about Donald Trump and Trump's relationship to Jeffrey Epstein.
He never, the president never, this is 20-something years ago, never said anything to me to make me think he was involved in anything improper with regard to Epstein either. He just didn't. He just said we were friends, and then we had a falling out over a land deal, property deal. That's all.
The former First Lady and Secretary of State had been furious while she was giving evidence when she found out a picture had been taken of her against House rules. There was a no picture rule. It was taken by a Republican congresswoman, and it ended up on social media.
Can you please explain how that
I'm done with this. If you guys are doing that, I am done. You can hold me in contempt from now until the cows come home. This is just typical behavior.
We will go off the record.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So I would like to understand how that's permissible.
Before the hearing was... It doesn't matter. We all are abiding by the same rules.
I will take that down.
Yeah,
So
well...
I would like to take a break at this moment.
Yeah,
I'd like to have
I'm
a
done
conversation.
for now.
It was an acrimonious hearing, entirely in keeping with the Epstein investigation, which is about justice and accountability. It's also about politics.
James Matthews there. I mean, you can feel the fury coming off Hillary Clinton there, can't you?
And you can totally understand it as well. On reflection, listening to some of the questions as well, it's almost more revealing than the answers, because you feel the politicisation in some of the questions and you pause and think, why is she there if so many other people haven't been compelled? They were willing to hold her in contempt of Congress, and yet there's quite a long list of people you should think should be higher on the list that they haven't.
I mean, Wilf's always making the point that this is a political process, right? It's not a neutral committee.
Well, this is more neutral than some congressional hearings can be, because it's obviously a factor that people have been very united on, and I think everyone can totally understand why Bill Clinton was threatened with being held in contempt of Congress if he did not testify. But I think people see Hillary Clinton's anger there, and you kind of get it and think, fair enough.
Lots coming up, including we're going to get more on the ground in Kuwait. We're talking to a former Deputy Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister there to find out what is going on.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Welcome back. Let's return to the war in the Middle East and get some more from on the ground in Kuwait. We're joined by Dr. Bader Musa Al-Saif, who's an expert in the region and, amongst other things, the former Chief of Staff to ex-Prime Minister of Kuwait and also a consultant at the office of Tony Blair at one point. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. To what extent has Kuwait been hit, and have you been surprised that Iran decided to target Kuwait?
We're entering day 4 of the war, and we've been hit since day 1. For those countries that revealed their statistics, and that's most of the Gulf states at this point, we come second after the UAE in terms of the attacks that we sustained, whether it's drones or missiles from Iran. The issue of surprise is not so much the issue that we're dealing with at the moment, because it was expected that they would retaliate if the war enters into a space, because it's a war, it's an existential war for Iran. And we've been trying to avert this war because of that reason. The element of surprise, if there is one, is they've long mentioned that they would be after supposed US bases in our different countries in the Gulf, even though these are, sovereign territories of the Gulf states as opposed to being US territories. But what they've been doing, the Iranians that is that they've extended their attacks to other infrastructures. They've gone after the airport in Kuwait. The American embassy was attempted, a few of the bases beyond those that have some American presence. So it's been quite extensive from that sense.
We spoke to the UK government a little earlier on the programme, who stopped short of saying they thought the initial action against Iran was legal. Well, what's your own view on that? Do you back the initial move by the US and Israel?
This is an illegal act. I mean, it's quite clear. In all terms and purposes, we have an international law-bound system that we haven't been observing, and you can go back to the days of Gaza and even before that, and this is just a continuation of it. And that makes it unstable for everyone involved, including the US and Israel. So we need to come back to the negotiation table. We need to let dialogue resume. We've had some close, promising results before this round started, just as we did last June, by the way, before the onset of the 12-day war. So I absolutely see this as an illegal act by the Israelis and the US.
Are you pleased, though, that Ayatollah Khamenei is dead or not?
It's not a matter of being pleased or not. I think this is left to the Iranian people to decide who their leadership should be. But if there is a point in which there is a sense that this is a milestone in the war, we need to have a rethink. This is an elongated war that they've started, the Israelis and the Iranians, on one another since 2024. And prior to 2024, you can look at the way that the country, Iran, was run, and it was very centralized under Khamenei. But since the direct attacks, since the spike in assassinations, they've really decentralized the command structure in Iran. So his death hasn't really impacted the ongoing activities, as you saw, and the supposedly seamless transfer of power as we've seen it in accordance to their constitution. So the question is, who's next? I think it depends on how deep the Americans and the Israelis go down the list of the leadership candidate and how much more assassinations will the Iranians be able to withstand.
Can you give us a perspective of some of the other, Gulf states? Because I guess in some ways it's a kind of story throughout history, isn't it, that smaller countries, other nations get squeezed and sandwiched by larger ones. What is it like at the minute in countries such as your own?
Sandwiched is the right term, which I've used before when referring to where we sit geographically between Iran and Israel, two long-time belligerents in the region. Look, it takes working collectively through the Gulf states umbrella. We've been working very hard and closely in collaboration with the Saudis, the UAE, Qatar, Oman, and Bahrain. And I think the closer you align with the other powers, the safer you are in your trajectory as a kind of small state.
Dr. Beda, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's have a quick look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
It'll be quite mild, quite sunny, mainly dry for much of the week, but western parts that are wet on Thursday. Most places will be dry with plenty of sunshine this morning. Although starting frosty in the north and the west, locally foggy in the southeast, southern England and the southern Welsh counties look rather cloudy, however, with some patchy drizzle. The extreme north can expect the odd coastal shower. It'll turn out quite mild again and won't be as breezy as yesterday.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
There is so much news. Iran, also, of course, the spring statement. Our next guest is Robert Jenrick, Reform UK's Treasury spokesman, and he's here with us. So with your kind of new Treasury spokesman hat on for Reform, we've got the spring forecast later, how worried are you that what we've seen in Iran is going to start impacting the cost of living with the rising price of oil?
Well, the cost of living is already a massive pressure for everybody across the country. You know, bills continually rise, whether that's energy, water, the cost of groceries at the supermarket, and wages are flatlining. This is only going to make that worse. You've already seen the international market spike. It really depends how long this conflict lasts, whether that's a permanent impact, but it's going to be a further pressure, and it's why we've got to get people's bills down. You know, Rachel Reeves is going to come to Parliament today and say that everything is moving in the right direction, that her plan is working. That's not the experience of people that I meet out on the streets of this country. We've got to ensure we bring those bills down. Okay. How do you do that? Well, stop hiking people's taxes would be a good start.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why that's happening is all the waste that you're seeing at the moment, where the government is spending too much money on benefits, on things that just don't matter to working people.
I'm going to rattle through a few things just because there's so much to talk about today, not least, of course, the conflict in Iran. And I just want to focus a bit on that relationship between the UK and the US. Donald Trump said he's disappointed. Keir Starmer didn't come in immediately with those air bases. Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary of State for War, said traditional allies have been clutching their pearls and wringing their hands. I mean, he's talking about us, right?
He is. Look, it's sad when a relationship that's so important as the one between the UK and the United States frays in this way, and we're perceived to be an unreliable ally because of the way the Prime Minister has dithered and procrastinated. Everyone can see that. Look, he is a weak leader, let's be honest with ourselves, and at the moment we need a strong leader. And part of the problem with Keir Starmer is he always puts his obsession with international law, this highly opaque and political view of what you should or shouldn't do in the world above the core security interests of the United Kingdom.
I do want to come in because there'll be an awful lot of people who think that actually Keir Starmer is right not to just jump as soon as Donald Trump says so.
I'm not proposing that, Sophie. I actually think that although our relationship matters to the United States, I'm much more interested in what are the interests of the British people. And there's no evidence that Keir Starmer has done that. He's really just acted upon the advice he's received from the Attorney General, Lord Herman. He's with Chagos, with all these different issues, he's much more interested in upholding international law than our own security.
I think the point that I'm trying to make, though, is many people would think he was right not to get involved in this conflict. I think it was General Petraeus, for example. In fact, this one question, thank you. I think it was General Petraeus who once said, the most important thing to ask is, tell me how it ends. It doesn't feel to me like we know how this one ends, right?
Yeah, of course. You should always think carefully before deploying British personnel, but we don't, at Reform, we don't want to see British troops on the ground in Iran. What we do want to see is our interests properly protected. And even when there was a drone attacking our base on Cyprus, which was endangering our troops and the families that live there, the Prime Minister was still unclear about what the United Kingdom's position was. But when our core interests are being endangered in that way, we should be very clear about what we're doing, which is defending those interests, mobilising what military assets we have, and let's be honest with ourselves, our armed forces are so depleted right now that that's very limited. But we should be deploying those to protect British interests and British personnel.
Reform very clear on this. The other party very clear on this is the Green Party, right? And actually, it looks like it could be benefiting from that stance. The latest YouGov poll for Sky News showing Greens have actually leapfrogged Labour into second place, 2 points behind you.
Well, look,
they're real opposition to you now.
I do think that British politics is shaping up to be a choice at the next general election between Nigel Farage and Reform on the one hand and a coalition of the left on the other. Keir Starmer, or whoever replaces him, in coalition with Zach Polanski.
Because it's interesting.
And most people, I think, sensible, decent, hard-working people watching this programme would not want to see that. If you think this government is chaotic and weak and harmful to the economy, just imagine what that would be like.
You say most people don't want to see it. And I do wonder if Reform had been a bit blinded to, I guess, the warning sign for your party from the Gorton and Denton by-election, which is that if people think Reform have a shot of winning somewhere, they will vote for whoever is most likely to stop you. Is that a problem?
Well, there will be tactical voting in elections, but no, we're not seeing that in all of the local council by-elections across the country where Reform is winning time and again, has won the vast majority.
The point there is, though, is we're talking about turnout.
Well, let's see what happens in May. I confidently predict that in May you'll see Reform become really the only national party doing well in Scotland and Wales, in the big cities and in provincial England as well. The Conservative Party, it gives me no pleasure to say this because it was my former party, is nowhere in this debate.
Come on, it gives you a bit of pleasure to say that.
No, actually, it doesn't. But, I think just the reality that people who, particularly on the centre-right, who share my values, watching this programme, the choice is shaping up to be Reform or Labour. But the worry with Labour now is it's going to be even worse than it has been in the past and will be this kind of coalition with Zach Polanski.
Just have one other quick question to squeeze in. I'm just interested to know what you made of Ed Davies' comments about Dubai. He said tax exiles should start paying taxes to fund the armed forces like the rest of us. The likes of Isabel Oakeshott and washed-up old footballers mock ordinary people who stay in the UK and pay our taxes here, but then expect us to pay the bill for their protection.
Well, look, I'm not going to get into kind of puerile attacks on people who choose to live overseas. I'm not leaving this country, trust me, neither are a lot of other people. But what we want to see is the UK be a country where people don't feel the need to do that. Why are all these people leaving the country, particularly young people at the moment who are not super rich? It's because they're being taxed to the hilt, they can't get on the housing ladder because all of the immigration and the failure to build, and the country feels like it's defeated at the moment. There's this sense of malaise that's got to change. We can fix it, we can turn the country around, but it's going to require getting people's bills down, getting people's taxes down, and getting good jobs going again in the country.
OK, Robert Jenrick, thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we're going to be talking more about Iran. We've got our very own Michael Clark, who is going to be looking through the situation there and across the Middle East.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. I've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. What you see a lot of here are military machines, soldiers, devastation and destruction. What you see very little of are the locals, the Gazans, the people who used to live here, the ghosts of this town. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered. You have the black flag, you have the yellow flag, people were kidnapped.
Inside this convoy, prisoners released by Israel in exchange for their hostages. The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. There were tears and there was defiance. This land has been farmed for hundreds of years, but now it's a scene of conflict. Israeli settlers have come to this area to seize land.
They've taken the land that I inherited from my father, and my father inherited from his father.
What would happen if you went over?
Oh, we'll be shot.
This is a place where the past is cherished, but the future is feared. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Sky News, get the full story first.
Well, hello and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Cheap.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Talking about the chaos of war means it's hard to know, of course, what's going on. Let's talk to Professor Michael Clark, who's here with us, to break it all down with us. Michael, we've been talking a bit about oil prices rising again today, and everyone's been talking about the Strait of Hormuz, which is marked on the map that we've got coming up. But you've been telling us about how it's actually quite easy to block the Strait of Hormuz. It's quite hard to keep it open. Just talk to us about what you've been referring to.
Yeah, I mean, you can say the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, but to block it, you only have to make it dangerous. And that's not very difficult for the Iranians. And they've made it dangerous already by some of the attacks that they've conducted, because it all depends on, first of all, it's the narrowness of the strait. So there at the tip is the narrowness, and that's quite a good example of where it is. All the deep water is outside the strait. It gets very shallow once you get inside the strait, and even shallower at the key point. So at the very tip of the Strait of Hormuz, that's 21 miles. So there it is, 21 miles. So 33 kilometres, same as the channel. But the channel that you can use is even smaller than that because of the depth. So there's an up channel, an up lane and a down lane. The up lane is 3 kilometres wide, the down lane is 3 kilometres wide, and there's a 5 kilometre separation zone in the middle. Now, that sounds like a lot of space, but it isn't. If you're talking about a 300,000-tonne tanker going at 13 or 14 knots, that's pretty small. And as they get up over that tip, they have to do a pretty sharp left turn. So the actual available space in a 33-kilometre narrow gap is actually only 11 kilometres. An up lane and a down lane, and you've got to stick to them, and you've got to be very careful on the sharp left turn. When you get round the turn, then you get onto the upside, as it were, going into the Gulf. Then all the water, that's Oman that we're looking at, that's the tip of the spear, if you like. All the water to the west of that, going into the Gulf, is very shallow. It's about 25 metres. 25 metres. Most of these big tankers, their draft is 25 metres, so they can't go there. So once they get round the tip, they have to go straight, and that takes them straight into Iranian waters. As they're coming up through the straits, they're in Omani waters. That makes them fairly safe. Then they do the sharp left turn. Then they have to go straight, and that takes them straight into Iranian waters. So all the Iranians have got to do is threaten them from their shoreline.
It kind of blows my mind that so much of the world's oil, the stuff that we're so reliant on all over the world, is like 25 metres of water.
That's right. Well, 25 metres is what, I mean, the smaller ships, the cargo ships, the bulk carriers, they could go into that shallower. It depends what their draft is. But, I mean, that 25 metres only then goes to 60 metres, even as you go further up the Gulf. So all the big stuff, and I mean, an average carrier now, let's say a Shell Max, is about 150,000 tonnes. That's twice as big as an aircraft carrier. And then the very large carriers and the ultra-large carriers, they go up to 400,000 tonnes. And they have a big draft, so they have no choice. Once they get round the tip, they have to go in a straight line, 13 knots, all the way along the Iranian coast. And the Iranians would find it really easy, either plant mines or attack them or send drones. I mean, you only have to make it dangerous to block the straits. And that's what's happened. So as of today, as of this morning, earlier on, there are 25 big tankers anchored either side of the tip because they don't dare go through. So, that in effect, the straits are blocked.
And again, as we were discussing earlier, only 4% of the world's oil comes from Iran, but about 20% has to pass through the Straits of Hormuz, which is why...
And 20% of natural gas, LNG. And the Qataris, you can only transport LNG by sea. You can't pipe it anywhere. By definition, it's all in big tanks on a ship. So the Qataris are completely dependent on getting their LNG out to the world through the Straits.
Michael, whilst we got you, just wanted to come to another question, which is, you know, everyone's sceptical that a revolution or a regime change can work. I saw someone yesterday saying, well, they were sceptical in 1979 that it could work, and then it did. I mean, just give us your assessment of how likely it is that we could suddenly see a change in sentiment.
Oh, yeah. Well, 1979, it all happened very quickly. I mean, the Shah of Iran, left in January, beginning of the year, 1979. In February the 1st, Ayatollah Khomeini, came back from Paris, just landed, and he was like the Messiah. People, thousands of people flocked to him. And Shapur Bakhtiar had been left as the interim prime minister. So Shapur Bakhtiar was sitting there at the centre of government, and Khomeini was walking around the streets like the Messiah. And the army, about a week, 10 days later, said, "We are neutral." And Shapur Bakhtiar was gone that day. Because once the army said, "We are neutral," that's it. Government loses all credibility.
Is that going to happen this time?
Well, the IRGC won't, because the IRGC and the Bajis, the militia, they are completely committed to the revolution. But they together are about the same size as the army. The army is about 600,000. The IRGC with the Bajis is about 600,000, roughly. So you're dealing with two groups of forces. Now, we don't know what the army might do. If the army sits on its hands, then anything could happen. But if the army, as it comes out and defends the protesters, then there would be a civil war. That's why the army sat on its hands in 1979. They feared that there would be a civil war and bloodshed and they'd be blamed. And they didn't trust the fact that they had a big conscript force. And both the present army and the IRGC are about 50% conscripts. Mm-hmm. And you might assume that the conscripts are more likely to side with any protesters who are brave enough to come out on the streets.
Michael, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Now it's the anniversary of the rape and murder and abduction of Sarah Everard, something that symbolises for so many, I think, women and girls, that really is a realisation of their worst nightmare, someone walking home when the very worst happened. Molly Malone has been looking at whether things have changed inside the Metropolitan Police.
I've been followed home before. It's something that is a reality.
People are scared to talk about these things. It's not right that we're not safe in the evenings.
The change is down to men.
I've already checked behind me twice.
I like to stay quite alert and aware.
5 years ago, Sarah Everard was picking up a bottle of wine on the way to a friend's house. Later that evening, she was abducted, raped and murdered by a serving Metropolitan Police officer.
She should still be alive today, and if policing was better, then she might be still alive today.
It was a horrific case that lit a touch paper in our society and ignited a conversation about women's safety and trust in the police.
We found widespread evidence of criminal investigations into hundreds of officers for sexual offences.
It's an incredibly awful truth that we have abusers and perpetrators inside our organisation.
It was also talked about as a turning point, a moment demanding change. 5 years on, I want to try and get a sense of whether that change is happening. How are women feeling in terms of safety in public spaces? And how is the police service doing to improve and build back trust?
Well, Molly joins us now. Molly, it's so stark, I have to say. Pretty much every single police force that came back to you said, yes, we have had criminal investigations.
Yeah, this was such a horrific case, wasn't it? And I think it felt really close to home for lots of women because of the circumstances. She was just walking home, but also because it raised questions about authority and policing. And what followed was a promise to root out unfit officers, of better vetting, but I kind of wanted to get a sense, it's not just a London thing. I wanted to look kind of across the country to see what was going on, and we had responses from 17 police forces, so that's about 40% of the total in England and Wales, and as you say, every single one of them confirmed that they'd criminally investigated their own officers for sexual offences since Sarah's murder in 2021, and all but one, so 16 of 17, said that they'd investigated for the more serious offence of rape, and sorry, there's lots of data here, but of those forces that investigated for rape, just over a third had brought charges. So I thought that there were some quite significant findings, and I spoke to a woman called Helen Millerchap, who works at the Met Police, but she's also the National Police lead for violence against women and girls, and she was quite frank in her response, and she said it is an incredibly awful truth that we have abusers and perpetrators at the centre of our organisation, and crucially, she said actually she thinks it's one of the biggest reasons that people don't report crimes, because let's face it, you know, women and girls are experiencing these crimes and they need to have faith in the integrity of the police service to be able to report those crimes. That there have been pockets of change, there absolutely have. We've seen better responses to crimes like indecent exposure, the non-contact sex offence that Wayne Couzens committed days before he murdered Sarah Everard. We specifically spoke to the Metropolitan Police, Mark Rowley, the commissioner there, who said he was clearly profoundly sorry once again to Sarah Everard's family, but also that they have sacked 1,500 officers for various things, including sexual crimes, within the last 3 years. So there definitely have been change and they're taking it more seriously, but I think quite stark that we found widespread evidence of criminal investigations. You also put it to Dame Vera Baird, who was the victims commissioner when Sarah Everard was murdered. This is what she had to say.
That really deep, hugely masculine culture is not going to support hugely the women who need to trust police and need to know that they can go and they will get a sympathetic person who comes out and tackles the problem of abuse, of harassment, of flashing in public places, none of the figures of which have significantly gone down since the Sarah Everard episode. There is a long way to go, even now.
So Dame Vera Baird summing it up, there is a long way to go. I think important, marking this 5 years, to properly evaluate how progress is playing out.
Yeah, and some really striking statistics that you uncovered in that, Molly. Great stuff. Thank you very much. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more coverage of the very latest in the Middle East with our reporters across the region, so don't go anywhere for that. We'll continue to build up, of course, to the Chancellor's spring statement later today as well.
Thanks, Molly.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome.
Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started. Good morning. It is 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
Iran threatens to set fire to any ship crossing the Strait of Hormuz shipping route, which could have a huge impact on the cost of living.
President Donald Trump says the United States is ready to fight a war forever, boasting healthy munitions stockpiles.
Israel says it's continuing simultaneous strikes on both the Iranian and Lebanese capitals. Meanwhile, the US Embassy in Riyadh is hit by a drone strike.
A very good morning to you. The United States says it struck Iran again overnight, claiming to have destroyed several Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps targets. We don't know if these latest strikes were the hardest hits yet to come that were promised by the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio last night.
Well, look, it's been a fast-moving day and a fast-moving week. So let's run you through the latest that we do know, because Iran has threatened to set fire to any ships attempting to transit the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if you're wondering what that is, it's a global shipping lane, and that threat has now spiked oil and gas prices.
Iran continues to strike outside its borders, including hitting the US Embassy in Saudi Arabia and a fuel import in Oman.
Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Force says soldiers are operating on the ground in southern Lebanon. It's a tactical measure, they say, along parts of the border.
Also this morning, President Trump says wars can be fought forever, claiming the US has a virtually unlimited supply of munitions to fight. However, a somewhat different message came from the Israeli Prime Minister last night.
This is going to be a quick and decisive action, and we're going to create the conditions, first for the Iranian people to get control of their destiny, to form their own democratically elected government, which will make Iran a different Iran altogether. But we are creating, America and Israel together are creating the conditions for them to do so. I think that if we go through what we plan to do, I think it will create conditions for peace. This is not an endless war. This is, in fact, something that will usher in an era of peace that we haven't even dreamed of.
Well, there's an awful lot of debate here in the UK about whether or not we should have supported the US and Israel more, or actually whether or not the action was legal. It's something that I was trying to get to with the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones. I asked him specifically if he thinks the US action in Iran was illegal.
The Americans have got to set out the legal basis for their interventions.
But our assessment is that we didn't think there was a legal basis for it. So it would be illegal.
We were not involved in the first wave because it didn't meet the test the Prime Minister's set out. Whereas what we have agreed to this week is legal because what we're doing is defensive action to protect British citizens in the region, of whom there are over 300,000 of them across the area. So I think the public would rightly expect us to do what we can to defend them. And on the basis of legality and British interests, that's why we've consented to the use of our air bases.
We'll hear from our Europe correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who's in Cyprus, and from our Defence and Security editor, Deborah Haynes, who's here with us. But first, let's speak to our international correspondent, Diana Magnay, who's in Jerusalem. Diana, so many moving parts overnight, but in particular, what's your take on what we have and haven't heard from both the Israeli and US leadership about their goals and their timelines here?
Right, well, I think especially from the Americans, there is a degree more ambiguity than certainly what we heard from Benjamin Netanyahu. But yesterday, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, said, you know, this is not going to be Iraq, this is not going to be endless. Donald Trump later, when he was pushed on it, said it'll be 4 or 5 weeks, but however long it is, it will be OK. And then it was in a post on Truth Social where he said, you know, we have an endless supply of munitions, we can keep going. And I think he was talking more broadly. He wasn't talking about the Iran operation. He was just saying that even if we are very much involved in the Iran operation now, it is not going to exhaust our munitions supply so that we're not able to project power elsewhere. I think that is the message that we should take from what Donald Trump has been saying, not that he expects this to go on for a very long time. But what exactly it is, or when it is, that the Israelis and the Americans would pull out and leave it to the Iranian people, as has been what they've been saying, is unclear. I think from Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, we've had the most precise definition of what the actual goals for the Americans of this war are. And he said, you know, it is to reduce their short-range ballistic missile capabilities and to cut down degrade their naval possibilities so that they don't interrupt shipping anymore. They have certainly promised retaliation for the attack on the US embassy in Riyadh. 2 drones struck that, causing a fire, and also for the loss of American service members' lives in Kuwait. 6 of them have died so far in this war. We've also got information from the Israelis overnight about their operation in Lebanon, that they have now deployed more troops to the borderline area. They're characterising it as defensive. But yesterday they said, in response to Hezbollah's attacks and after significant strikes on southern Beirut, they said that all options were on the table. And we know that the Lebanese army have withdrawn from some of their positions in the south as the IDF start to take place. So I think that will be a very febrile area. But the Israelis are saying, obviously, it is still Iran that we are most focused on. But I think the opportunity now, not just to tackle the Iranian leadership, but also to hit Hezbollah once and for all, given how severely their capabilities have been degraded over the last 2 years, is very much on Israel's mind too.
Diana, thank you very much indeed. Diana Magnay there, giving us the latest from Jerusalem. We can talk now to Elsa Bunkle, who's in Cyprus for us. We know that Cyprus and the UK bases there have been targeted. What's the latest where you are?
Well, I mean, it's been quiet for the last 24 hours or so, Sophie, and there were 2 waves of Iranian drones, Sunday and Monday. The ones Monday yesterday were intercepted successfully. The one on Sunday, at least one of them, did hit the runway. We're told that the damage was limited. We haven't seen any kind of evidence of what the damage was like, but we're told that it was limited. I actually have to say, thinking about it, there's been at least a couple of aircraft, military aircraft, come in the last hour and a half. So clearly the runway is operational. But it goes to show both, the risk that the wider region is under at the moment, and the fact that, the British military assets are a target. It is not, I should explain, simply a British military base. Yes, it is an RAF base. It is a massive British military outpost in the Middle East. But there is, and there has been, long before these tensions and this war, a sizable US presence here. I mean, it fluctuates in size, but they've used it for special forces missions to project into the Middle East. Spy planes are based here as well. So it is a target. The ability to defend it is pretty limited, to be quite frank. There's such is the case that the Greeks have sent a couple of fighter jets and some naval ships to help protect the island. But I think it highlights how the region has been sucked into what is going on in Iran, whether it's Cyprus, whether it's the Gulf states, as Iran has, as it always warned it would do, widened out the response to the attacks by the United States and Israel. I guess to try and divide and conquer, to try and turn some of America's allies against them, to try and put pressure on America to end the war sooner or later. But of course, the risk is for Iran is that it just drags others into the war against it.
Alistair, thank you very much indeed.
Deborah's here with us in studio as well. Deborah, we've been debating a lot the kind of aspect of whether or not the UK can be targeted. Just remind us of exactly what capabilities Iran has and how it can affect UK interests.
Well, Iran's got short and medium range ballistic missiles, which are the most potent threat to the region, as we've seen, like the Gulf states. And obviously the British have troops, several thousand troops actually, spread across the Middle East. And then also in Cyprus, on Akrotiri itself, there's around, in normal times, 4,000 service personnel and their families based on at the RAF base there. I think we have moved more people in to bolster defences, and obviously we know that the F-35 jets were put there too, but these can't defend against ballistic missiles. And actually, just as I was listening to Ali just now, I saw something pop up on my military Twitter account saying, and actually it's being confirmed by Reuters, and it's quoting the Cyprus news agency, saying that France plans to send anti-missile and anti-drone systems to Cyprus after the attack on the British base. So that's an interesting development, if confirmed, that, and again, underlines the fact the limited UK capabilities. We do have a warship, a Type 45 destroyer, that has the ability to defend against ballistic missiles. There are 6 of them, in fact, altogether. But of those 6, only 3 are listed as operational. And of those 3, only 1 is currently ready for deployment, though I'm told the other 2 could be quickly readied, whether that's true or not, in terms of crews. I'm sure it is true, but in terms of crews and how capable it would be, again, it just underlines the real pressure that the military is under right now.
Can you talk a bit about the US-UK relationship? Because look, there's always going to be bumps in the road. There's always going to be disagreements, Donald Trump mouthing off, etc., etc. But do you think this is a bit more serious than that? The, I guess, falling out they seem to have had over Iran?
Certainly at a political level, it's really serious. I mean, Donald Trump was clearly really frustrated with Keir Starmer before the war started, with those messages that he posted on social media, and also said publicly, criticising the Prime Minister over the whole Chagos deal, and clearly wanting to be able to use Diego Garcia, which is one of the islands there that has a British-American base on, to launch bombing raids against Iran. He also wants to use RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, which again is a place where, for example, B-52 bombers could strike Iran, significant capability there. However, and so the fact that the British didn't allow that initially and now have changed their tune, clearly that's frustrating. Whether it filters down, though, on a military to military, intelligence to intelligence level, obviously there's deep relationships there, but it is going to have an effect. It's surely going to have an effect. And if America is going to look at the UK as a less reliable and willing ally, is it going to then be less willing or reliable when it comes to defending British interests?
Mm. Well, let's hope not, but it's a critical question at the moment. Deborah, thanks so much, as always, Deborah Haynes. Now, the first group of relieved Brits arrived home last night on an evacuation flight from the UAE. Barnaby's here to tell us a bit more about that. So I guess airspace more broadly there is shut down, but some flights are escaping.
Yeah, that's right. Airspace across much of the region is still closed, but we are starting to see a trickle of flights coming back to the UK. So yesterday, some planes coming from the UAE to the UK, and that's going to continue today. So Emirates is planning to fly 2 planes to Heathrow, 1 to Gatwick and 1 to Manchester. Etihad is also flying a flight to London Heathrow, but many other routes remain closed. Qatar's airspace is still closed. British Airways has cancelled all of its flights to the region. So this is going to take days to clear as a backlog, and it's safe to say that people landing back in the UK yesterday were pretty relieved to be home.
Barnaby, great stuff. Thanks so much. Let's just quickly check in on how this has affected all of the markets. Oil prices have picked up again today. Yesterday we rose sort of 7 or 8%. Today another 4%. We've got the graph for you coming up, and so Brent, the international gauge of oil prices, is up. This is obviously not the oil price. This is stock markets, which is also worth pointing to, because you are seeing a bigger reaction to the downside in equity markets today than yesterday. So.
I don't know what was going on there.
There we go. Anyway.
It's broken. The oil prices are going up so much that the whole thing's broken.
The key point being that the contagion is spreading, and we are seeing equity markets down a full 2% here in Europe today, more than yesterday, and oil prices are rising again to the tune of 4%.
So I guess the question now is, will that rise in oil prices, A, last, and B, start feeding through to consumers? And of course, the inevitable consequence of that would be an increased cost of living. Bad news for the Chancellor, who today delivers a spring forecast. And we can speak to Alex, who is on Downing Street for us. Alex, what are we expecting?
Well, she's trying to, Rachel Reeves wants to keep this a low-key affair with very few policy announcements, but it looks like world events are going to dominate and force her hand. Obviously, with oil prices going up, that could have a massive impact on the cost of living here. So she may be forced to answer some questions on that.
Alex, what time does everything unfold today? And have we had any of the mood there of arrivals?
Yes, so we've had some cabinet ministers start arriving. One of them was Peter Kyle. I asked him about the state of the special relationship following Donald Trump's latest comments that Keir Starmer hasn't been particularly helpful on Iran. Here's what he had to say.
Morning, Peter. Is the special relationship over?
Alex, great stuff. Unsurprisingly, not getting an answer out of him, but I think it'll be one of the key questions today for all of those cabinet members. Alex, thank you.
Yeah, they're slightly trying to downplay the spring forecast, but it's still going to be pretty significant. It's going to be a bit of a health check for the economy, find out how everything is going. Stay with us on Sky News midday until 2 p.m. We'll have special coverage of the spring forecast with me alongside our political editor Beth Rigby and our economics and data editor Ed Conway chewing through the numbers.
Looking forward to that from midday. When we come back, we'll be talking more about the very latest in the Middle East.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what? A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Well, let's return to the Middle East now. We can speak to someone who very familiar it should be said, to being personally attacked by the Iranian regime.
British-Iranian journalist Rana Rahimpour was the long-time lead presenter for BBC Persia and worked there 2008 until 2023. She joins us now. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. What was your initial reaction when you saw the news of the US-Israeli military action and the fact that the Ayatollah was killed?
The confrontation was inevitable. Everyone was expecting it, especially since the 12-day war in June 2025. We weren't expecting the Supreme Leader to be killed so quickly. It took a while, and it only really landed when the Iranian state media confirmed it. And there was obviously a moment of happiness. This is a man that has killed and tortured thousands, hundreds of thousands of Iranians over the course of his leadership. But I was also filled with fear, and that fear is getting more and more as we watch how it's expanding, how it's now taking the whole region, you can see the escalation. And with no clear end in sight, no clear succession plan, it's very difficult to know where we're heading.
I think this is it. You see there's no clear end in sight, no succession plan. Because Donald Trump has said this is about regime change, but is there an alternative regime who could take over in Iran? Are we anywhere near that point?
We're not. We're not. There are some wishful thinking going on in the West, but the reality on the ground shows a deeply wounded, very dangerous, seven-headed dragon, as the way I see the Islamic Republic, that is mourning the loss of its leader. And it's not just in Iran. We're looking at the Shias in Iraq, in Lebanon, who are going to do everything they possibly can to hurt the West. I cannot foresee how regime change is going to look. I think history has showed us that aerial bombardments alone cannot change regimes. I can't see how it will happen from inside because people are taking shelter. They're running away from the major cities. President Trump keeps asking them to take over. But no, they're taking shelter because they don't want to be killed. They don't want to be killed by American bombs, and they don't want to be killed by the Islamic Republic's bullets. There are no organized opposition, so people don't even know who to rally behind, even if they want to go on the streets. So it's a very, very confusing moment, not just for Iran, but for the Middle East and ultimately for the world.
Do you think that things will calm down anytime soon, or will this escalate quite significantly and persist?
I think it will escalate before it calms down. Every war in the world will have to come to a diplomatic solution. We know that. But I think both sides are going to exhaust everything that they have. And I don't think that the Shia radicals in the region are going to let this go. Because the Iranian Supreme Leader was not just the leader for Iran. In fact, he was more of a religious leader. And his death, even though many Iranians are celebrating that, is a big loss for many Shias in the region. And they are a ticking bomb. They're now attacking American consulates in the region. They are going to make life very difficult.
When we introduced you, we said that you were under constant attacks and threats by the Iranian regime in your role. I just wondered if you could tell us a bit more about that, like what happened?
So this is common practice of the Islamic Republic. They don't like journalists. They would persecute journalists. So when I joined the BBC's Persian service in London, a few years later, they put my parents under a travel ban. They interrogated them. Then they put all BBC Persian staff they started pursuing us on charges of conspiracy against national security just because we were reporting on what was going on inside the country. I was receiving personal death threats. My conversations with my parents who live in Iran were wiretapped by the regime in 2022 because I was one of the main people covering the protests, the Mahsa Amini protests at the time. So they have used every tactic, and unfortunately, they're still doing that. Many of my former colleagues at the Persian service are doing their job under immense pressure, and that hasn't stopped.
Those sorts of tactics might they go away, even if we don't know what regime follows? Do you think it will be less hardline, or again, is that wishful thinking?
My fear at the moment is that if the regime doesn't fall, it will become much more violent. And usually the first victim of their violence is the Iranian nation. I heard from a friend who was on a video call with her sister in Tehran yesterday, and she showed videos of fighter jets in the sky. And on the streets, there were regime supporters on their motorbikes chanting Haydar, Haydar, which is a Shia call for war. And those calls are not against the United States. It's against any potential opposition to the regime. So large parts of the Iranian population is now caught between the hardline regime and the American and Israeli bombs. And that's not going to go away. And it's, if anything, if this regime is not finished off, it will get much worse and it will kill more and more people.
Can I just ask one very quick final question? How weakened is Iran as a whole, the regime specifically militarily? We know the economy is very weak. Are they running low on military supplies or not? I
presume so, because they are using unprecedented amount of ammunition. Only in the last the first 2 days they used more drones and rockets against Dubai, the UAE alone, compared to what they did in Israel in the 12-day war last June. So they will definitely run out, and the question is whether they will get any support from their ally Russia, or whether they will resort to more one-to-one terrorist attacks and militia movements in the region. But they will definitely transform into a different form of resistance sooner or later.
Rana, really fascinating. It's so good to have you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and also as a journalist, my hat goes off to you, I have to say, for your continued sort of reporting that you've done in the region. Thank you.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about how this all impacts the Prime Minister politically here domestically. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Well, the US and Israel have been attacking Iran for 4 days now. Donald Trump this morning said that wars could be fought forever and claimed the US had virtually unlimited supply of munitions. Our lead world presenter, Yada Hakim's in Jerusalem for us. Yada, great to have you with us. I guess my first question is what you make of what some of the key leaders on both sides of this have been saying and what it implies as to where we're going in the days ahead, if this is going to escalate and prolong or calm down.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Wilf, and it feels like in this moment it's a sort of contest of will between the United States and Israel and Iran. Can Iran take on the United States and Israel's military superiority and might? No. But are they employing and taking on a strategy where they think that they can outlast the United States in this? I think they do believe that they have time on their hands. And we've seen in the past few days, in the last 72 hours or so, President Trump give a sort of dizzying almost explanation of why they've gone into this war, the number of justifications that he's given. We saw him on Saturday morning come out in that video call, and he sort of called on the Iranian people to come out onto the streets, and he said, "We are with you, but it's going to be up to you." And then after that, we heard from the administration that it was the military targets that they were looking at, the nuclear facilities as well, and it wasn't really regime change. They weren't there for nation building, is what the Secretary of War said. And then we sort of almost had a fourth or fifth explanation from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who said yesterday to reporters that it was a threat, potential threat to the United States, an imminent threat. If Israel attacked Iran, they felt that they too would come under attack. So what the objectives of this conflict are, how long it's going to go for, remains up in the air. As you say, we don't know if it was going to be just a few days, as President Trump alluded to initially, or whether they're looking at 4 to 5 weeks, or frankly, if the Iranians are now wanting to drag in the entire region and prolong this for as long as possible before Donald Trump says, enough, let's reach some kind of compromise.
I mean, what you say there about the length of it and the fact that there's no clear kind of off-ramp really says it all. Yada, I'm keen to get your take on the UK government. It's something we've been discussing quite a lot this morning, and it feels like there's been this kind of war of words with Donald Trump saying he's disappointed with Keir Starmer. What do you make of the state of the special relationship?
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about the fact that the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has gambled the special relationship by being reluctant to join in this conflict. But, Sophie, there is institutional memory here. You would have seen the other night in the House of Commons with all those barrage of questions coming to the Prime Minister, many people invoking the war in Iraq. And the foreign policy establishment, much of the establishment, has that still fresh in its mind, the justifications for going into the war in Iraq. And of course, Afghanistan at the time felt very different because it was a threat on the United States. The coalition was formed and they went into Afghanistan and overthrew the Taliban. But Iraq very much felt like regime change, and the justification the United States made at the time ended up being bogus claims. And so there is caution, there is concern. And you'll know that during the Iraq War, the United States first went to the UN Security Council. They then sought approval from Congress. They then put together a coalition of about 49 states. This time around, it appears to be Israel and the United States, with the UK government, cautious about how it's going to get dragged into this. And frankly, in the end, it might not have a choice. And at the same time, Sir Keir Starmer may have damaged his relationship with Donald Trump and get dragged into this because, frankly, the Iranians want to drag the UK, the allies, regional powers into this conflict because they want it to have not just regional implications, but international implications. And certainly when we see them hitting energy infrastructure, for it to have an economic impact on the global economy as well.
As always, great stuff. Thanks so much for setting it all up for us. Yada Hakim there for us in Jerusalem. Now, we've been talking about the impact this has had on the economy and oil prices, as Yada referenced. Let's bring in Paul Kelso, who's been diving into this in more detail for us. Paul, take it away. What are the key things we're looking at the moment?
Yeah, Yada's exactly right to look at the impact on energy infrastructure, because where this is going, clearly not certain at the moment, but there is an immediate impact economically, largely driven by energy prices. Why don't we take a look at the geography counts here? The Straits of Hormuz, the key channel for vessels from the Gulf. Here we see the Straits of Hormuz. This is marine traffic since the war began, and what you will see is the red ships, the tankers, will slow down since the threat from Iran has increased. This is Iran, this is Ras Al Khaimah, the UAE on this peninsula here. It's been a threat overnight, it freezes there. That's where we are this morning. See, all these tankers, usually 100 a day, will be going through this channel. They are essentially waiting to see what will happen. A threat overnight from the Iranian military that tankers could be attacked if they try and make this trip. So it comes with a great deal of risk. That is slowing down the oil trade. That has an impact, obviously, on prices. Let's see what that has been since this began. We can show you the oil price chart. It's up about 17.5% since this conflict began, about 5% this morning. We're up above $80 a barrel. It was just a few days ago we were below 70, 65. We were talking in the context of Russian oil last week about stability in the oil market and oversupply. Well, that stability has gone. The volatility of fossil fuel trade shown here. There's another impact, one that we feel very acutely at home, which is the gas price. Perhaps the most direct attack yet on any energy infrastructure has been an LNG, liquid natural gas plant in Qatar, the biggest producer behind the United States. They have stopped production. And look, the price of wholesale gas in the UK has soared up 93%. That's over 150 pence a therm, a huge climb. Now, people will hear war impacting gas prices and might throw their minds back 3 years to the Ukraine war and the impact, the huge impact that had, the price shock, the cost of living crisis. It's not on the same scale. The increase is big, but the quantum is not the same. Back then, 2022, when Russian gas was effectively switched off in Europe, that pushed domestic energy prices through the roof. The government spent nearly £100 billion paying our energy bills. It is not on that scale, but it will feed through into domestic prices, because we're not just reliant on gas to produce power in power stations, it also, because of the way the market works, the price of gas impacts the price of everything. Renewables, nuclear, we all end up paying the short-term marginal price of gas, so it has an impact. Let's have a look at the price gap. Just last week, we were talking about the energy price gap being set from April. The message is, don't panic. These prices are not going to come through to your bill. Now, if we look at this is the price gap that was set that will kick in on April the 1st. It's an average use, it's about £1,650. It's lower than it was in January. The next price cap begins at the start of July. And this, last week, this red line was the forecast for where that price cap would be, essentially about the same. But Ofgem, which sets this price cap, reviews the price cap in this period now. It sets one and then it looks at the data about where the price should be so the energy companies essentially can cover their costs. This conflict will be impacting right now that data collection. If you're on a fixed rate, you might feel you're in a good place, but as ever, it's always worth looking at the rate. So we don't know what will happen to this, how high this might go. Well, it depends, like everything else in this, how long this conflict goes on.
Oh, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Right, let's have a look, shall we, at how the weather's getting on.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
It's going to be mild, quite sunny and mainly dry. Good news for much of the week, although western parts do look a bit wet on Thursday. Most places, though, are going to be dry, and there's going to be lots of sunshine around this morning, which is the good news. It will start a bit frosty in the north and the west, locally foggy in the southeast, southern England, southern Welsh counties look pretty cloudy, though, and there'll be a bit of patchy drizzle there too. The extreme north, so right at the top, can expect the odd coastal shower as well. But look, it's going to be pretty mild, and it's not going to be as windy as yesterday.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, undeniably, when it comes to this Middle East conflict, the Prime Minister's walking a fine line between appeasing Donald Trump and protecting both British interest in adhering to international law.
Yeah, fine line, I think, is the sort of generous way of putting it. He's faced criticism for what some people are saying is a U-turn by allowing America to use 2 British air bases, Fairford in Gloucestershire, Diego Garcia in the Chagos Islands. But I guess the government would say, look, these are difficult decisions, and if the facts change, then the response change. Let's discuss this a bit more, shall we? We're joined by the columnist at Labour List, Stella Santiago, and political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. I'm sorry, I probably got your pronunciation wrong there. Apologise. It's been a long morning. Lots going on.
It's a good effort.
Just talk us through Keir Starmer. It's a difficult line, right? There are going to be some people on the right who say, look, he should just follow Donald Trump. He's done the wrong thing here. Others on the left will say the opposite. What's your take?
It's a difficult decision because our strongest ally is being very unpredictable and erratic, but he has been like that for a few months. Keir Starmer so far has taken the right decision, initially rejecting to join the first strikes in Iran because there was no legal basis. Now that there is a legal basis, since Iran has attacked Akrotiri in Cyprus, the British military bases, and there is the motivation to protect British citizens who are in the region and British allies, we are allowing the US to use our military bases just for defensive purposes, and what this means is that they are only allowed to attack the source of the missile attacks. But Keir Starmer is right, both for his party and for the country as a whole, to not intervene further, to not go in with what Donald Trump is doing, because we are already seeing the economic impact because of the rising gas prices. This has the possibility of becoming a wider conflict. At the same time, remember, this is a week when the Labour Party is announcing some difficult reforms to the asylum system. So we will be talking about the refugee crisis. What is the current intervention by the US in Iran going to do for the refugee crisis? Israel this week also started attacking Lebanon, Beirut, where a lot of refugees from the region are hosted. Who is going to take care of all of these people? What is going to be the long-term impact?
Yeah, lots of questions.
Kevin, how do you think he's handling this balancing act?
I mean, it is very difficult, isn't it? I think it almost encapsulates the political position where he finds himself between reform on the right saying you're not going far enough, the Greens on the left saying you should have nothing to do with this whatsoever. We've seen a poll this morning which showed the Greens leapfrogging Labour for the first time with YouGov, and it just shows I think he's in the worst of all worlds now. As a lawyer, we know he's an adherent to international law. They're trying to stick to that as closely as possible. But the situation is so unpredictable. We've seen Donald Trump out again this morning telling the Sun, criticising Keir Starmer's position on Iran again. It is an absolute nightmare for him. It's not where he wants to be. And we've got the spring statement this afternoon. All those numbers could go up in there because of the potential economic impact of it as well.
Are you saying he should take a side either way on the will we or won't we support the US? And which side are you suggesting? No,
I don't think I think at the moment he's probably in the right place. I think he's been fairly consistent with his own principles. We know from what he said, many years ago that he was not in favour of the Iraq War. He says that we're learning the lessons from Iraq. I think the government sees a lot of echoes of Iraq America going in very gung-ho with no plan for what comes next. So I can understand why they want to be a little bit reticent about going full-throated. However, were Iran to start targeting British assets in the region, then he's going to have to make a very, very difficult decision, and that is when I think the crunch point will come.
I was really interested, you brought up that poll with the Greens. And look, it's only one poll, etc., etc., etc. But I do think it is worth reflecting on. They just lost that by-election to the Green Party. They've now been leapfrogged by the Greens in the latest YouGov poll. And I really got the sense when I was speaking to Darren James this morning that normally if you interview a Labour minister on the day when they're getting, absolutely shot at by the Americans, like saying that they've been hand-wringing and all that, they'd come out and say, no, special relationship, Donald Trump's so important to us. I didn't get the sense from them at all. They're almost kind of stepping back, trying to put distance between themselves. And you've got to think that they're looking at what's happening domestically and politically and thinking that actually maybe we do need to shore up that left flank a little bit.
No, I completely disagree on that. I think it's very strange that both Donald Trump is doing what he's doing and that Nigel Farage and Reform Richard Tice, a lot of reform figures are coming in favor of what Donald Trump is doing. This is not what the reform base was. And this is not what, even in the US, the populist right did not want more foreign interventions. This is not a popular decision for the vast majority of voters, and I'm sure there will be polling that shows that. I do not think this is... There was this suggestion when The Sun had an interview, Harry Cole from The Sun had an interview with Donald Trump overnight, and they asked Donald Trump whether they think that Keir Starmer is acting like this to appease the Muslim vote. And Donald Trump, of course, responded, maybe, yeah, maybe he's doing that. Great idea, let me use that. I do not think that's the case at all. There is, for one, there is a very proud Labour tradition in Harold Wilson from the 1960s, who did not join in when the US went to Vietnam, and that was a good decision. And secondly, it is, as I said, it is exacerbating the refugee crisis.
But I think it's a change. I guess the point I'm making is that I think it's a change from how Keir Starmer has dealt with Donald Trump until this point.
For sure. I think maybe that started with the Chagos deal, which Donald Trump's announcement that he no longer supports the deal happened on Truth Social, an alternative social media website. I think by then, maybe they started realizing that there is simply no line of accurate communication.
Kevin, how do you think this poll plays out for Keir Starmer in the eyes of his MPs? Is it a reminder? There's been these big international distractions, but is it a reminder of the result in the by-election last week? Is it a pressure point for Keir Starmer?
Undoubtedly. I mean, the Labour strategy up until now has been only Labour can stop reform. The Gorton and Denton by-election blew a hole in that. This poll would seem to just re-emphasise that the Greens are a real significant threat to Labour on their left flank. Now, we're still 3 years out from a general election, so let's not maybe overanalyse it. However, I think it still will send a shiver up the spines of an awful lot of Labour MPs, those sitting on small majorities who are exposed on their left flank, and they think unless we tack to the left, then the Greens are just going to eat our lunch over there. But at the same time, you've still got those MPs who'll say, no, hang on, the real threat is still reform. They've been leading the polls for a very long time, so you've got to tack to the right. I mean, it's an absolute nightmare position that he finds himself in. He's got to somehow try to plot a way through it.
Stella, Kevin, thank you both very much. We really appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be back out in the region to Beirut next, where John Sparks will be joining us live.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. We can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. We've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. What you see a lot of here are military machines, soldiers, devastation and destruction. What you see very little of are the locals, the Gazans, the people who used to live here, the ghosts of this town. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered. You have the black flag, you have the yellow flag, people were kidnapped.
Inside this convoy, prisoners released by Israel in exchange for their hostages. The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists. But here, the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. There were tears and there was defiance. This land has been farmed for hundreds of years, but now it's a scene of conflict. Israeli settlers have come to this area to seize land.
They've taken the land that I inherited from my father, and my father inherited from his father.
What would happen if you went over?
Oh, we'll be shot.
This is a place where the past is cherished, but the future is feared. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Sky News, get the full story first.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching.
Tonight on The Wrap.
We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree.
And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual.
Yeah, good morning, Wilfred. I'll tell you a little bit about where I am first. We're outside the central mosque, the Al Amin Mosque in the centre of Beirut in Martyrs Square, which has turned into a bit of an urban campground. People pitching up here with their bedding, with whatever food that they can carry from their homes in the southern suburbs of Beirut, Dahia, particularly where the majority of residents are Shia Muslims. That area has been getting pounded by the Israelis, as well as the Bekaa Valley and southern Lebanon as well. And people sleeping in their cars, people are pitching tents, sleeping rough, and it gets pretty cold here at night. And I think it's a sign that this military conflict is also turning into a humanitarian crisis as well. And as we've been here, we've seen more and more people arriving. Yes, the military activity is increasing. A lot of hits in southern Lebanon this morning, and also a statement from the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, saying, I have instructed the army, the Israeli army, to advance in southern Lebanon to take new strategic positions. And they already occupy certain strategic points. They have done for the last 15 months. They're going to take more territory. In response, Hezbollah, fully prepared, it seems, to fight back. They released a swarm of drones, they said, at 6:30 this morning. They fired those off towards an Israeli airbase. It was just one of several attempts by them to fight back. And they released a statement, and I think this is significant. They said they were prepared to put an end to the aggression, Israeli aggression, by all available means. And I think that is a signal that this conflict is in the process of turning into a serious military confrontation.
John, I'm so interested to get your wider take on this as well. I just remember you sitting in the studio reflecting on the protests that we saw in the streets on Iran. And now we are in this situation. It feels like it's happened so rapidly. How, I guess, kind of optimistic or pessimistic are you that those people who took to those streets, who risked their lives, many of them lost their lives, will see the kind of country that they deserve, frankly?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think that they're in a difficult position right now. You know, a lot of Iranians were absolutely overjoyed. I mean, they held parties when they heard that Ali Khamenei had been killed. These are people who have nothing but hatred for him, people who have suffered great repression, death to family members and the like because of him, and they were overjoyed that this has happened. But now, because of the bombing campaign, that the scale of this US-led coalition's military activities, people are going to be really worried, particularly those living abroad, peering in. They'll be unable to get through because the internet system is blocked, telephone system is blocked as well. People are going to be really worried, and I think that's the thing. It's what comes next for them, certainly. What comes next? Yes, glad that Khamenei has gone, that senior leaders in the Iranian regime have been killed, but what comes next? It's very uncertain, and I think that will be reflected in their feelings as well. Same thing here, you know. There's a Lebanese government, of course, Hezbollah. It doesn't represent the Lebanese people. It would claim to represent half. There is a Lebanese government here that is trying to govern the country, and effectively here in Lebanon, they've lost control. I mean, Hezbollah has gone to war with the Israelis. They have a prime minister here called Nawaz Salam. He has released a statement saying that the cabinet has banned Hezbollah, their military and security activities in this country. They've banned them. They've instructed them to limit their activities to political activities only. But, you know, how is he going to do that? Is he going to use the Lebanese army to do that? I mean, if he does, you're talking about potential civil war here. So the Lebanese government, they've lost control. It's these unintended consequences, isn't it? These second and third order consequences that flow from that initial decision to attack in Iran. And it's very, very difficult to predict.
John, great stuff. Unsurprisingly, much appreciated. John Sparks was there in Beirut this morning. And I have to say, the team, once again, just stepping up to the plate. We've had reports, of course, from Jerusalem, from Beirut, from Cyprus this morning, Dubai yesterday. And stay safe, guys. Amazing reporting.
Lots more still to come on Sky News, the latest from Iran, and, of course, building up to that spring forecast too.